My name is Tyler. I was raised in the Central Valley of California, more specifically Ceres and Modesto area. I've had many run-ins with the law. One of the most memorable was in the summer of 2012 in Ceres, California. At this point in my life, my addiction to drugs and alcohol was in full swing. I was outside a friend's apartment. We were listening to music, and a song came on, and I was feeling it, so I proceeded to start dancing. I was partially in the road, making a scene, being goofy. A unmarked car with no lights on pulls up. A person in plain clothes gets out and tells me that I'm being detained. Apparently, this was a cop on his way to work. Anyway, I took off running, and I'm running through these alleys, and I got away at first, and I decided to hide. I peeked around this corner of the alley, and it was like perfect timing. The cop and I, we saw each other. He was perpendicular to the alley with the squad car. So I proceeded to turn and run and jump a fence, and as I'm like at the top of the fence, he grabs me and throws me to the ground. At that time, I thought they got me. I was on the floor. I learned a lot that day. One thing I did learn was the attack and let go command in German. The let go command resonates for me because they were yelling it at the dog and it wouldn't release my leg. I don't know if it was due to bad training or like a bloodlust, but they had to pry the dog's jaws apart to get it off my leg. It was honestly a little traumatizing. I harbored resentment toward that cop for a long time. I had to let that go. He wasn't worth carrying around all that hate. It was excessive force in my mind. They took me to the hospital, sewed me up. They booked me in on obstruction charges and then released me the same night. I had a broken foot and my leg was tore up real bad. I've never heard anything about it after that, but mind you, I did leave the state shortly after that. In their mind, I was just, a drug addict that day, and because of my defiance, my life didn't matter to them. As of now, I cooperate with law enforcement, and honestly, I'll never give them a reason to do anything like that to me ever again, hopefully.
They have to weigh whether or not they actually need the police against how this could escalate and somebody innocent could be killed.
I think it's saying there is overreach and there is probably some very questionable judgment going on.
You have to remember that the police officer that's pulling you over is a person.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Social Discord, episode 24, Good Cop, Bad Cop, Part 3, How to Become a Cop or a Criminal. I'm your host, Dalen Turk.
I'm Kara Tebow.
And I'm Curtis Medina.
So we just listened to that pretty startling audio that was sent in by a fan. How do you guys feel about that?
That was difficult to listen to.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because for me, every time I recount, that's a word, right? Every time I tell a story about, an encounter with a cop or whatever it may be, it's just like off the top of my head. But you hear like at the point where he turns the page, and he put a lot of thought into this, it seems like. Yeah. Like this is something that he's taking very seriously.
Yeah, so I know Tyler. I actually went to high school with him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I put out on my Facebook, hey, does anyone have good story about a cop, bad story about a cop? And, I was like, kind of like, just send it in. We'll discuss it. I kind of expected to have a few different things, to kind of just do a mashup of a bunch of stories back and forth. And that one was the one that caught my ear. I know it caught your ear too. I wasn't expecting sort of the importance behind what was in that message. He seemed like it was a struggle to get it out.
Yeah.
You know, like you were saying, you know, about the when you know, he's turning a page, which the only time I've ever known people to be reading it off who aren't like, you know, in an industry or whatever is when they're telling a story, they want to get it right, and they know that if they don't do that, it's going to be, you know, they're going to, you know, not be able to get through it. So you can hear that emotion in his voice. It was really hard to hear because, you know, I went to high school with him. I've kind of kept up with him just a little bit on Facebook, and I really appreciated him sending that in,
Yes,
telling
Tyler,
that story.
If you're listening to this, thank you very, very much.
It's so hard to listen to. You know, there's a lot of questions that come up when you hear it. How in the world is somebody in plain clothes expecting somebody else to just believe that they're a cop?
Yeah, Kara, you and I had the same reaction right when he said that a plainclothes officer, assumingly on his way to work. What was your reaction to hearing that?
Yeah, I mean, that would scare me. And I've been told as a woman all the time, even just, hey, if you see someone come up to your car, they pull you over, and they don't have, you know, a uniform on, you have every right to call 911 and confirm. But it didn't sound like Tyler even had time to confirm that this was a real cop. And something that stood out to me as well, and that was him mentioning how obviously traumatic is the word he used. It was to go through this experience with the dog. And it really just highlights, you know, the rest of his life and probably the people around him, their views of police officers are going to be shaped because of this incident. And how many people in America have the same views and trauma?
Well, and he makes the remark of how the dog won't release. The dog won't release, and it's, you know, he's saying it's these German commands, and he's like, I don't know if it's bad training or if it's bloodlust. And the fact that bloodlust like came to his thought process is horrifying.
I know why, though. I mean, because a dog doesn't know what they're doing. Like, to them, it's a game, right? I mean, that's how, you know, they don't train. It would be traumatic for a dog to, like, truly understand that this is a, you know, a bad person or whatever. But, like, you know, maybe if the person is attacking, say, you know, their owner or something like that. But in this case, you know, they sent the dogs after him just because he was running away. Right. You know, so the dog, you know, just thinking this is a game, and that can be confused with bloodlust. I mean, you know, if you're the one that they're gnarling.
And maybe I missed it. Maybe I was just caught up in the audio, but did he say he was doing anything illegal? Like, did he say...
said he was dancing in the street. He said, so I think you know, he didn't say this, but the assumption that I got from it was he was somehow intoxicated or on drugs or something like that. He was dancing in a street. He didn't say whether or not he was being like a nuisance or like, you know, blocking traffic or anything, which is, you know, the reason that you think most people would kind of like pull him over or whatever, pull over to stop it. So he admitted that he was being a nuisance, but, you know, that's kind of the situation where in most cases, if it was a cop, they would be like, hey, you, stop doing that. Yeah. I'm a cop and there are consequences. And then, you know, if he continued or something, or he was actually a danger to himself, then you might get, you know, you might call an on-duty cop or something like that. But this guy seems like, based on this story, and again, we're not hearing the other side of this, you know, so we're kind of basing it all on Tyler's perspective. But based on that, seems like this guy who's off-duty, he decided to sort of, you know, be a Canadian Mountie and always get his man. And he decided that this infraction was worth his time, his energy, and possibly killing Tyler to stop it. And to me, that's sort of like textbook excessive force.
Yeah.
I mean, agree. The fact that they dropped the charges immediately probably means that they thought that too.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise they would have arrested him, done a bunch of other things to justify this.
Well, and as he points out, he's like, you know, they just saw him as just a drug addict. You know, just another drug addict on the street. You know, let's target him, or, you know, whatever it may be. And
you know,
it's frustrating.
Well, and there's, from the conservative perspective, remember that quote from a couple episodes ago, where he said something like, you know, all these liberals want to make laws that protect the criminal, and you know, and it's like, you know, feel bad for them or whatever. but like you create the criminal when you overdo this kind of force for what is essentially nothing. He's being a nuisance. That does not justify all of these things.
You know, my aunt and I have very different views, you know, and in a lot of ways about just like what a police officer's role is in society. But her and I were both talking about and agreed upon the fact that a lot of us make stupid mistakes. A lot of us get drunk and dance in the streets. A lot of us are nuisances, but a lot of us don't get caught. A lot of us aren't, you know, people of color, minorities. A lot of us aren't someone that's particularly vulnerable to the legal system. So, I mean, imagine if we all got caught for all the things we're doing. So maybe the rest of us are just getting lucky.
Well, and a lot of people don't live in areas that are over-policed.
Right.
You know, I mean, this is so Ceres, you know, is a town that I grew up in. It's, you know, it's sort of a in the middle of a large population that kind of just is unending wave of population that just, you know, goes from city to city. But in that whole, say, 45-minute stretch, there's about 1 million people. And so I would call it, even though this is going to, you know, if you're in the rural area, you're like, whoa, 1 million people. Like, I'd actually call that a pretty small city because of how far it's stretched out. And yet, growing up there, I know firsthand that it is, you know, it is a dangerous place to live. And that's why the police try so hard. But at the same time, the police have, you know, a terrible reputation for over policing to try to make up for the criminal element that is there.
Part of me, and I understand, obviously, this is a terrible situation for Tyler, and by all means, like I agree that it was excessive force, and we'll discuss this further on in the episode. But part of me wonders if he hadn't ran, what would have happened? Because I know there's going to be a lot of people out there that will say, well, he shouldn't have ran, which part of me agrees with it. If he hadn't ran, it probably would have been like, okay, like, just stop doing this or whatever. And so
the textbook answer is you never run. Yeah. It is stupid to run in this day and age. You know, if you're in your car, they have your license plate, they know who you are. If you're standing in front of your house or somebody else's house, you know, most likely they're going to catch you, even if they don't catch you. So it is incredibly stupid and short-sighted to run. However, that I believe is more like victim blaming. Right. You know, it's like, oh, well, you run, so therefore we can do whatever we want to you. You know, you shouldn't have threw that gum on the sidewalk, you know, now, because you ran, now, you know, you got a bullet in your head. Like, like, nope, that does not justify that.
It's saying, because you ran, you're opening yourself up to all these different types of disciplines that can happen.
It's just like saying, you know, oh, you were wearing a short skirt. Well, you were asking for it. Like, no, that's victim blaming. No, they were not asking for it. You know, you did the terrible thing to them.
But I do go back to and I know it's not, unless I'm, you know, misremembering, it sounded like another cop did show up. But I still do go back to the plain clothes thing. Like, I just don't think a citizen should be expected to follow someone's orders, especially in the height of that moment, especially if you're intoxicated in any way, to follow orders from a person in plain clothes. Like, I've specifically been taught growing up not to listen to somebody in plain clothes until I can verify that they are, in fact, a police officer. Right. So I do think it's a bit unfair to hold someone accountable to that as well.
Also, I actually looked into this because of this call. So most police forces, or say, how do you say that? Like jurisdictions?
Sure.
Whatever. Most police offices, they actually discourage any cops doing what this cop did. I mean, for any reason. I mean, not just the excessive force part, but even saying, I'm a cop, you're under arrest. Like, they really discourage that because it's so easy to overturn any crime that they might stop. And it's so dangerous, it actually puts the cop at a disadvantage.
Sure.
That if it is a truly dangerous situation, they don't have backup coming usually. They, you know, or they don't know where their backup is. They might not be wearing their bulletproof vest, or, you know, or have their full arsenal or whatever. Like, I mean, it's terrible. It's a terrible idea to do.
It opens up everything to just these horrible legal questions because there's just so much liability involved. Yeah. You know, and unless the act is like, oh, like this person is about to cause a ton of harm
Right.
or a ton of damage, yes. Otherwise, it's so easy to get overturned.
The exception is if them not interfering will cause loss of life or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, like the Austin shooting we talked about a couple of episodes ago that happened way back in the, what was it, the 60s? Or, no, it was the 50s, wasn't it? I'm blanking out, but it happened decades ago.
Yeah.
And in that case, that was the perfect example of how like a cop who was in plain clothes would definitely want to
Yes.
stop a shooter from killing people.
Yeah.
You want them to do that.
Or even as simple as a cop is getting groceries at a store and he sees an armed robber.
Sure.
Perfect scenario.
Sure.
But, you see, a plainclothes cop and there's some kids skateboarding and he pulls his gun on them and accidentally shoots one.
Oh my God.
Not justifiable.
I mean, I'm laughing because it's such a silly, situation to be in, but these things really are happening.
Yeah.
I felt bad when I realized all of a sudden I was laughing because
It's real.
It's a real thing that is going on. It's, you want to say that never happens, but it happens enough that police are getting a really bad reputation with, I'd say, the average person who deals with them on a daily basis.
Yeah. So before we get further into this, this episode is going to be a little bit different than the past two we've done in this series, which focus more on history and context. Like I said, the title of this episode, How to Become a Cop or a Criminal. Curtis, can you real quick, before we dive in further into the actual content of the episode, explain what it is we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so I really wanted to start with that call because that totally changed how I wanted to do this episode. Originally, I was going to suggest something fun. I was going to say, hey, let's talk about movie culture, with cops and how a lot of times there's superheroes and this
Right.
whole thing. And, I was going to even do a little super cut of like all these different cops from different movies and stuff, Yippee-ki-yay, I was definitely going to be in there. And then I got this call and, it suddenly decided it wasn't as funny and entertaining as I would have liked it to have been.
Yeah.
Because this is a real thing that really affects people. So given that we've started that way, we're going to take a more serious tone for this episode. And this episode's called How to Become a Cop or a Criminal. And we're going to sort of take an archetypal cop and we're going to talk about the different things that can lead them to break bad. We're also going to talk about how easy it is to be a criminal, how easy it is to get into that system for things that are fairly minor, like dancing in the street. You'd never think that would lead to that repercussion, but it does. So just want to talk about good cops, how they become bad cops, or maybe they already were bad cops, and how the system sort of hides them, rewards even bad cops when they shouldn't.
So the instance in which Tyler was, for lack of a better word, attacked and arrested, and we talked about it in the last episode, I believe. We talked about consensual crimes. And that is one way in which you can be arrested. So let's dive into some other ways you can be arrested, starting with disturbing the peace, which I guess, it's a public safety violation. I guess you can kind of say Tyler was probably disturbing the peace, someone would argue.
Yeah, you could say just about anything is disturbing the peace. Because,
pretty much.
Because your peace might be different than my peace.
Yep.
My peace might be playing loud drums in my garage. Your peace might be total silence.
My piece starts at 7 p.m. when I'm ready for bed. So with the people in the courtyard, I don't like it.
It's a law that's just really wide, and it is a large portion of why people are arrested, especially people who don't necessarily already have a criminal background.
Yeah.
It's kind of like your easiest entry into the criminal force.
And you'll see actually a lot of these lower level kind of misdemeanors and whatnot are pretty wide-ranging and vague, and a big part of that is because in the justice system, they'll try and pin them on something bigger, but because they have these lower-level things, they'll go into a plea deal and plead guilty on these lower-level offenses.
Because they have to get them for something, right?
Yes.
So it's actually fairly rare that you just get off scot-free. Like it's kind of an insult to they feel like they've wasted their time if you are completely innocent. They want you to be guilty of something, otherwise they did their job poorly.
Yeah.
So disturbing the peace, laws that exist to make it a crime to create any kind of public disruption or commotion. One of the things I don't like about how the United States is set up is we have vastly different laws in different states.
Yeah.
And you cross a state line and something that was legal is suddenly illegal. It's like in this state we don't play music after 10 p.m. or that's an arrestable crime. But in this state there is no such law, so it's up to the judgment of the police officer or something like that. In most states, though, the person's conduct must have been on purpose, willful, or with bad intent, otherwise. In other words, malicious. So it's not enough that a person just engaged in a annoying thing that harassed somebody, but they have to have sort of willfully disturbed the peace. So that's why when a cop comes to your house and says, stop doing this, that's not just a warning, that's actually getting you into the legal sort of bind of if you continue doing it, now it is arrestable.
It's like setting up your intent, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's
So
very good. Yes. It's the irony of you see all the videos on YouTube and the internet of the Karens calling the police on young black teens and whatnot for disturbing the peace. And then it turns right back around to where, well, no, she's the one disturbing the peace because these kids aren't doing anything malicious.
Right, they're just standing there.
Exactly.
Actually, I think it's okay to share this story. A friend of mine, he couldn't get into a camping ground, and he decided him and his friends to camp in a parking lot of a grocery store that was closed. And then the next morning, he needed to use the restroom, so he decided to pee in the parking lot. I don't know where, but I'm pretty sure, knowing the person, he wasn't peeing on the door or something. He was just peeing on a tree or something.
Right.
The person who was opening up the place called the police on him for disturbing the peace.
Wow.
For urinating, and so he had to have a whole interaction with the police officer over this. And this was, I don't think it was arrestable, but it definitely was the police was trying to give him a ticket for it.
Well, you could technically be charged as a sex offender, right? For peeing in public.
Can you really?
Yeah.
I drunk 21-year-old Kara was reminded of that a couple times.
Kara, no!
But yeah, no, you can literally get on the sex offender list. Yeah. But again, it's one of those things of you're unlucky enough to be caught. So many drunk kids
and get a police officer that wants to ruin your life for it.
Exactly. So it's those little things. Come on.
I cannot tell you how many times I've peed off the back of my deck in this house.
You're in the middle of nowhere there, so I don't know.
I don't think I'm going to offend the cows.
So some of the factors that a judge can consider, though, for whether or not it's disturbing of the peace is the location, like yours. Well, I think it would be very hard to prove that was disturbing anyone. The time of day, the place, I don't know what the difference is there, but the words that you were used, if it was something that you do with if you were cursing or something like that, the amount of the kind of escalation of actions, things like that, and so judges have a huge discrepancy of whether not to do this, and that's actually it's weird because I think the same thing that the same reason I respect judges, it's the same reason that I don't really like police, that they have this amount of power, because a judge can see the full picture after the fact, and they can say, nah, that was, that's not a crime, that, there was circumstances or whatever. They have that separation, but a cop is in the moment. They make a split second decision, and suddenly your life is changed.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, police do have a idea of what the law is. You know, some of them are very smart and they know that this is justified or whatever, but they can't understand all of the different things around it. So I feel like more mistakes happen because we give police so much open range to decide, and they're like, let the courts sort it out.
Well, and that's why I personally believe that every police officer should have at least 2 years of criminal justice secondary education. I'm a pretty strong believer in that.
I mean, they're enforcing the law.
I mean,
Yeah.
They're enforcing the law. Do they know it?
If you're a police officer and you have to ask yourself whether or not this is worth ruining their life over, the answer is no. You shouldn't have to ask yourself. It should be something so crazy.
For a lot of police officers, that's not what they're thinking about. What they're thinking about is enforcing the law.
No, they're thinking about, am I covered if I do this?
And maybe so.
And that's not right. Like, that's thinking like a politician. you know, will I get voted out if I, vote for this? Or,
Right.
It's like that. It's like, police officers thinking, of course they want to help. I get that part. But in the moment, they're thinking, am I justified? If I was on a stand, in a court case on the stand, would I get away with this kind of thing? Or would not, not necessarily get away, but like, would it be acceptable?
Why don't we move on to public safety crimes?
Okay. So the quote here is, public safety crimes are crimes that often seem trivial. These crimes are important because they help officers deal with situations before they get out of control.
A little bit more of like a preventative measure, I guess.
This is like the precogs in Minority Report. Like this is like, except for just a couple of things, like, I don't know, like murder, like you don't have to commit murder to be guilty of attempted murder. But other than like a couple of really crazy things where it's really clear you intended to do something really bad.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm kind of against some of these preventative measures because it gives police way more to do before there is anything to do. And again, it gives them too much freedom to decide that this will be illegal.
Well, it makes a subjective enforcement of the law even more subjective because you're trying to enforce the law before the real crime is even broken, kind of.
Right.
Although I will say in a police officer's defense, I can see how this would be a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
Right.
Because
And
if
that's
something
true.
does happen, the first thing out of someone's mouth is going to be like, you could have stopped this. You saw them getting rowdy. You saw this coming. We of course all want to live in a safe society. So I can see in a police officer's defense why they would rather be safe than sorry and having to answer for why someone got shot or why a rock went through someone's window or any of those things where escalation could
So
happen.
I was in Alabama a couple of years ago. And I was walking through like the downtown, and all of a sudden I saw people with semi-automatic weapons just walking around, just really calm. I mean, everywhere. And it took me a few minutes to discover that there actually was a gun convention going on. And they were just walking into the gun convention. Now, a cop has to decide, okay, there's a gun convention, so this is not a dangerous situation. I don't need to do anything. But if those same people were standing, I don't know, in San Francisco or something, like the cops would probably be a lot more freaked out, because it's not as common.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like it's the where the issue comes into play with these, like the public safety crimes, or it's a more of a proactive approach to the real, more dangerous crime is that's where personal biases really come into play.
Yeah.
Because it's like you're, say I'm a racist cop. That's the stereotypical example. I see, this white kid over here and, oh, he's a white kid. He's fine. But I see this black kid. Oh, well, he's going to cause some issues. I'm going to go at him with, oh, well, you were doing this and it was going to lead to this.
The thing I always say, though, is I think it has a lot more to do with how they carry themselves, not just a skin color at this point. Some cops are just racist, but that same, they could be doing the same thing if they're in, a polo shirt versus like, stereotypical sort of gang member attire in a gang area. The cop is going to look at it in a different way. And I could see the justification for why they might want to prejudge that person, but they shouldn't.
Yes.
Because you don't know what someone's heart is before they do it.
Yeah.
Well, people will probably, I think, a pretty good example of this, and granted, obviously the circumstances are very different, but, the cases in which, a person is shot because they, a police officer thinks they have a gun, turns out it was just like a stick or whatever, and then Kyle Rittenhouse, who, he was just
walking
let to
around.
walk around, and
Yeah.
he ended up killing 2 people. And regardless, like I said, the circumstances are also obviously very different, but I think you can't ignore that hypocrisy of the 2 things.
No, or the institutionalized and like ingrained preconceived notions. There's a show, I think I've mentioned it before. It's called 100 Humans. It's on Netflix. And essentially it brings 100 different people from all demographics, all races, all ages into a room, and they play different scenarios out. Like little silly things like, separate people by age and have them put together something with instructions, to like see. But there was one experiment, and it was like a black room, like a dark room with different objects in the way. And the individual would come up with like a fake gun, and the people hiding behind the objects, these folks are all friends. They've been together for weeks and weeks doing this study, and they have to do like an immediate response kind of thing. And the percentage of people who would trigger the gun, because their aim was to hit a burglar or whatever.
Right.
The people who would trigger the gun when a black person jumped out was astoundingly high. And it was like very traumatic for even like black individuals had the same reaction too. And, there was a couple people who were just broke down in tears because they're like, that's my friend. And that was my thing. So, this all plays a role. Obviously, there's like something in our society that's caused these ingrained thoughts and the systemic racism, and like that has to play a role. We're talking about other humans using their judgment on these things, and that's quite scary when you think about how ingrained these things are in ourselves as humans.
I might actually underestimate, the amount of racism that people have.
But my point is that I don't think people always realize. And like all these people that, were trigger happy when a black person jumped out from behind these things, I don't think half of them would describe themselves as racist.
Like in their daily life, if they talk to a black person, they wouldn't treat them differently. But
They're
in
friends.
this very unique situation,
our society has done something to cause this like so deep inside of us. And so it is really tough to realize that these human beings are the ones making judgment calls on people.
Well, and Curtis, at the top of the episode, you talked about how you wanted originally to talk about, about culture and movie influence and whatnot, but, there's still a part where we can talk about that seriously, because for so long, black actors could only fall into very specific roles. And those roles were, slave roles back in the day, housekeeping roles, gangster roles, these very specific stereotypical roles. And it's now that we're starting to see black superheroes, we're starting to see black, protagonists in different light,
There's a fantastic movie I recommend to everyone called Hollywood Shuffle with Robert Townsend. I just watched it. It's hilarious. It was also, I think it was co-written by Keenan Ivory Wayans. It was like,
oh wow,
like pretty much like his first movie. It was like right around the time of Don't Be a Menace, I think it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I recommend it because Robert Townsend plays a black actor struggling in Hollywood who refuses to play a stereotypical gangster role because he wants to change the image, and that's exactly what it's about. Like, there's a great line in there where he says, "I want to be the first black Superman." Like why is that such a big deal, kind of thing? Like, like why can't there be that? And you got to remember, this is the '80s where nothing like that had ever really been done.
Right.
So now it's a little bit more common to have to consider different races for all kinds of different parts. But back then there was this idea that if you were black, you had to play one of those types of people. So yeah, highly recommend it. But yeah, I wanted to go over real quick. I think this was all under the public safety crimes section.
And this is from the criminallawyer.com?
Yeah, criminallawyer.com was really helpful in breaking down some of the way that the law looks at arrests.
Yeah.
And from that website, these are the different things you could be arrested for. So this is, like, to me, this is easy. Like, I actually thought it would be harder to become a criminal, and it's not that hard. I thought it'd be harder. You don't have to do a bank robbery to become a criminal. Like, you can, so the first thing, fighting or challenging someone to fight in a public space. I know a couple of people who have gotten arrested for this, actually.
Good time.
Yeah. Sometimes when they were the, instigator, sometimes when they were just defending their life. I mean, that kind of thing. Sometimes when someone threatens to fight you, you have to threaten them back just for them to back off.
Right.
And that's actually illegal. That can make you into a criminal right there. Using offensive words in a public place likely to incite violence. And that's wide open. I mean, again, offensive to who? Why are these words offensive? Shouting in a public place intending to incite violence or unlawful activity.
Very similar to number 2.
Yeah. I mean, January 6th, I think, could be that, right? I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing that there's some kind of allowance if you're protesting something, but...
Well, and I think the hard thing with that is proving the intent to incite violence.
Right. It's all about what's going to happen, because nobody wants to wait for it to happen.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know. To me, I know it's terrible. When bad things happen, it's terrible. But I think the majority of crimes should be crimes that happened.
Yeah.
Not intended to happen.
Saying, yeah.
I don't know. It's just, to me, that's just, it's too wide of a scope. Bullying a student on or near school grounds.
Yep.
I remember in high school, there was a round the clock city cop that would be there, and at first we thought it was pretty cool because we had that protection, right? Because this was right after Columbine and all that stuff. But then I had a couple of friends who were arrested in high school for nothing, for drugs, something stupid.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we realized, like, they're not just there to protect us. They're sort of there to just monitor every little thing we do and make it and escalate it to something that it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, all of they're known as school resource officers. And all 3 high schools in my town in Missoula had them. The one at my high school was named JJ. Super cool guy. Apparently, he was actually kind of ironically a bully in high school.
Perfect, right?
But as an
it's
adult,
either that or a bouncer. That's what you have to become, right?
As an adult, super nice guy.
Let's see, holding an unlawful public assembly, which, gosh, that could be anything. Shouting profanities out of a car window in front of a person's home over an extended period of time.
I guess that's like full-on harassment.
Yeah.
To me, like, in my dumb mind, like...
Curtis, you suck!
In my dumb mind, like, extended period of time was just, like, driving really slow. You suck. That's not what that means. That means, like, basically pestering someone to the point of causing them harm. Allowing excessive dog barking in a residential area, because that's a serious crime that we all need to make sure those people spend years in jail. Intentionally playing loud music during the night that continues even after that fair warning. Which
there you go. This one's for you, Kara.
This is literally, I'm not kidding you, the clock hits 9 and I'm like, nope, turn it off. Like, not in my house. You guys are really, grandma.
Let it go to 10.
I am
10 is like the fair, like.
Fine, 10.
I'm like ready for bed by 9 every night.
Oh, I am like, eye mask on, sound machine on, fans going. Like, I'm not kidding you, 9:01. I'm not tolerating it.
Kara and I are old people.
We're old souls.
See, this is what you do. If music's playing at a neighbor's house, first you ask if you can get invited. You go for a drink for like an hour, and you're like, okay, I got to get to sleep. Is there any way you could turn it down? Okay, cool, bro.
Wow, that's
Cool,
very
bro.
diplomatic.
Now you call them and they say you're not invited. You're like, nope. Cops?
Call the police.
I will say,
I'm joking,
all
I'm joking.
jokes aside, I have definitely had to have this conversation with myself. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, I can be Karen in my heart sometimes. And I'm like, okay, Kara, like, someone playing music, especially given the reactions that we've seen from police, is not a reason for me to put someone's life in danger. So if you're
Exactly.
ever thinking about calling on someone for being a public nuisance or a public safety issue, like, are you okay with putting their life at risk too? Are you okay with that?
And if your life is not in danger,
Can
let
you
it
get
go.
over it? Yeah.
See, yeah, we still, like, our neighbors, when we lived in our apartment in Austin before we moved out here, they were crazy, and I felt bad because he had dementia really bad, and he thought the KGB was still after him. It was a whole ordeal. So nice old man, but I'm happy I don't live next to him anymore.
Just a nice
Now
paranoid old man.
I just have the cows just yelling at me each morning. For those listening, you're going to hear a lot about the cows from here on out throughout this entire podcast. But
really are cows outside the window.
legitimately. So this you have here ideas that were not on the website, and you have public intoxication, which I feel like is a very obvious one.
Yeah, and it probably goes with one of those other things, but technically, even if you're not creating a nuisance, if you're intoxicated at all, you can be arrested. One thing I learned a while back in my college years was that they would pull you over on a bicycle, for example, if they suspected / took a wild guess that you might be intoxicated because you were on a bike at 2 a.m. And I never had anyone pull me over on my bike, but I did have several friends that they might have had a drink, but they were not being any kind of public nuisance, but they would get cited or at least warned.
I'm pretty sure there's a thing
just for
where you can't get pulled over for riding on a horse drunk. I think that's gotta
be one. That's gotta be a urban legend.
City folk have different, or country folk have different rules.
Either that or I'm getting a horse. You can't stop traffic, block movement, such as an unregistered protest. You can't break a curfew, which like would be if a hurricane was happening. I think technically you can be arrested for being out when you're not supposed to be, or in an area you're not supposed to be. And then if you're a juvenile, a lot of cities have it where you can't be out after a certain time. So yeah, it can be for that too.
Was curfew drilled into you guys as a kid? Like, my mom put the fear of God in me that if I was out past 10 p.m. in the neighborhood, that the cops were literally going to come get me and arrest me and send me home. Was this not a thing for you guys?
I'm trying to remember.
You can, honestly, I was just curious.
No,
that.
I mean, as a kid, I didn't really go out that much.
We'd play a lot of, like, hide and seek in the neighborhoods, like, at night.
same.
And then our parents were like, if you guys don't get home, the police officer are going to come bring you home. So the clock would strike 10 and I would book it. Like, I can't get a permanent record.
I will say, like, we had curfews and whatnot, but we also, there was like, on the we had a big field at the end of our neighborhood, and then across the field there was another neighborhood, and there was like a pretty well-known like pedophile over there.
Oh, good.
And then in another neighborhood on the other side of our neighborhood, I remember it was me, one of my brothers, and some friends. We found a dog, and a guy came driving around, and we were trying to walk around the neighborhood with his dog, and he's like, "Oh, you found my dog? Thank you." He's like, "Why don't you come by later and give you a reward?" And of course, all of our parents were like, "No." And then that man was arrested for molesting like a bunch of children.
Jesus.
Oh my gosh.
And so I definitely understand, like, as younger, we had curfew, but yeah, like same thing. Like we grew up, I mean, other than I guess the two pedophiles, like it was a very like stereotypical American white picket fence neighborhood where we all just played ball tag in everybody's yards and everything. So
I can agree to that kind of curfew. The one curfew item that bothers me is like when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening. I was in South Carolina at the time, in a town that would not protest Black Lives Matter because they're very conservative. And so they put a curfew out just in case
Yeah.
a protest might break out.
to, like, prevent. I mean, it prevents free speech in a way as well, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, but yeah, I mean, they treated it, because it was happening in other cities, they treated it like it was already gonna just destroy society if people protested. And I thought that was creepy. I don't know, creepy of the government to tell others. Like, it made me want to protest. You know, it pissed me off that sort of like it was this veiled racism that, you know, that they were doing it because it was over Black Lives Matter, whereas you know, if it was a pro-Trump rally or whatever, like, it, you know, would have been totally fine.
Yeah.
So
well, it gives them an excuse to arrest and harass anybody for any reason because, you're past curfew.
Yeah, you don't have to be doing it. You could be sitting there, you know, sipping on a lemonade, and it's like, oh, you're doing something illegal now. I have a reason to talk to you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like those things.
Obviously, there are circumstances like for, you know, like big storms and stuff like that. I get it because it's for public safety. But in some circumstance of this, where it's like, you're just trying to make an excuse to arrest people. Yeah, like that's what it seems like.
If violence breaks out, at that point, you can set a curfew for a day or whatever, you know, to let it calm down. A very limited amount of time. But then you have to let it go and let people come back out and protest some more. That's how America works. Whether you agree with what's being protested is totally inconsequential.
Right.
So defenses to disturbing the police, usually, like, if somebody accuses you of disturbing the peace, that usually falls under three categories of what people say. They either say, I didn't do it at all, I did it, but I had to, as in self-defense, or three, that my conduct didn't disturb anyone, therefore you don't have the right to arrest me or cite me or whatever.
And oftentimes it's protected under my First Amendment right.
Right.
You know.
But that all of those defenses are done after the fact. You can't run. You can't spit on the police officer. You can't punch the police officer. All these things have to be done later. The courts are there to figure this out for you. But if you screw it up and you do something additionally illegal in defense of your First Amendment rights, that becomes the secondary issue, and the first issue is whatever illegal thing you did. It sucks. You shouldn't have to listen to an officer who is breaking your First Amendment rights, but that's where we're at in our society.
Right. You know, and we're talking about the disturbing the peace, these public safety crimes, and these aren't even involving illegal drugs yet.
Right.
Like, if you have drugs on you, it immediately makes everything worse.
Yep. So under the arrestable offenses for illegal drugs, first thing is possession of a certain illicit drug that can violate both the federal and the state laws. Drug possession laws, they vary really widely from state to state, especially right now, how, like, you know, there's 15 states that have legalized marijuana. But they really vary, and they also vary in the amount of enforcement that police spend time with. You know, like, for example, probably a decade before it was legal to smoke marijuana in California, it was just known that San Francisco police officers didn't care about marijuana.
Yeah,
there was a place called Hippie Hill that I used to go to all the time, and it was a destination, and on any given day you could arrest probably 100 people.
Yeah.
For
well,
it.
There's even here in Austin and Hippie Hollow.
Yeah.
I see a trend here.
Yeah, Hippie Hollow that's where everybody, one, it's a nude beach. Everyone goes there to get naked, and two, everyone goes there to smoke weed.
I mean, I haven't been there, but I know what goes on there.
Yeah, even there's the 360 lookout too that overlooks the bridge on 360 that goes over the river. You know, people go there, hike, look at the view during the day, but at night, everyone goes there to smoke weed. Everyone knows it. That's just where you go.
Yeah, it's like the culture of a city can dictate the enforcement of laws, which must be really difficult if you're traveling and you come from Austin to Dallas, guess what? They're not going to put up with your marijuana in Dallas.
Right.
No.
Like it is tough. How are people supposed to navigate the justice system?
Gosh,
like
that's
that?
city to city. That's not that like wow, that's crazy.
We're talking 3 hours apart, and
Yeah.
I guarantee you, if you start smoking a blunt in Dallas, the cops are descending upon you, as are the Karens. So
Very much so.
So prosecutors basically have to prove that the drug in question was a controlled substance, that the person knowingly had possession of or control over the drug. And possession also includes what is referenced as constructive possession. This means that that the defendant had access to the illegal drug, even if it was not specifically on their person at the time of arrest. For example, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, get pulled over, there's weed in your backseat.
Or even, you're in high school and they do a random drug test of looking for the drugs in your locker.
Yeah.
And, it's like, well, 3 people had access to this locker. But, it's not mine, but it's in your locker. So it's sort of like, it's hard to disprove it. It goes against that idea of like innocent until proven guilty. You actually have to prove yourself innocent in those cases.
What about drug manufacturing?
So that occurs when an individual is involved in any step of an illicit drug production process. So these, I guess, are the like the business people of the drug world, the entrepreneurs of drug kingdoms, those who sell certain precursor chemicals, specialized equipment can also fall under this. I know in certain cities they ban like bongs, for example, because marijuana is illegal.
Yeah.
And so they have to like prove that you're selling a bong, but not for marijuana. And if you go into the store and you say that you're going to use it for marijuana, they legally can't sell you it, which is really weird.
It's interesting. There's actually a huge real estate market in Texas for people buying up land because they're basically banking on the fact that weed will become legal in the state.
Really?
And there's a huge real estate market of people just buying up land so they can have future weed farms in Texas. It's really weird. One, because once it becomes legal, like, boom, they'll start here, but also because Texas has just no regulations on anything.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, fun fact.
That's interesting. I mean, marijuana is going to be legal everywhere. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
I know that we could do a whole episode on this, and I'll just mention it briefly and we can move on, but I just have to reiterate how irate it makes me when I think about the fact that, look, I'm from Portland. My parents lived in Denver. Weed is extremely recreational. Uber Eats delivers weed in my hometown where I'm from. And yet there are countless individuals, most of them Black men, serving jail time for the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, if that doesn't make you furious, then in my opinion, there's something off about your moral compass.
If your state legalizes marijuana, in that instant, they should release every single person who was arrested for low-level drug offenses.
It's mind
For any drug offenses or just for
We'll say
whatever is
marijuana.
legalized?
We'll stick with marijuana.
So that I think that is actually what happens. I mean, I think that has to happen if you're in. No, maybe it doesn't.
I don't think it does.
Well, in California, I know it did. They went through 3 steps. One was to legalize. 2 was to release anyone who was in there for anything nonviolent, and 3 was to expunge it from their record. Which even helped them more because now they can get jobs that they couldn't get before. So if you're complaining about people not having jobs and, being a criminal their whole life, well, maybe you shouldn't ruin their life with something stupid so they can't get a job. Huh? Maybe? Huh?
Before we move on to the next drug thing, or keep going on this, I will say I was listening to another podcast the other day, and an ad came on just for Denver. It was literally just an ad for Denver, Colorado. It was weird. And so it's this guy listing all these great things of Denver. We've got the Rockies and this, that, and there's a guy in the background who goes, and weed is legal. we have weed. And he's, and we have the rivers and this, and we have weed. That was the entire ad, and it was incredible. It was so funny. I was like, I want to go to Denver now. It was a wonderful ad for the city.
I knew people who moved to Denver, and it was in their top 2 reasons. I mean, this was like when they were the first basically to legalize it. I mean, they were like, yeah, I'm done with this crap, like hiding this or whatever. Drug trafficking is selling, transporting, or importing illegal drugs.
Can I say that anything like drug trafficking, sex trafficking, all these traffickings, they sound really just scary.
Right.
Like something about and maybe it's because I watch Narcos. I don't know. It all just seems really scary.
Well, and like there are the really scary organizations that do these things, but then there are also a lot of just mom and pop operations that they just grow weed and that's how they make their retirement money.
If I take weed and I drive to New Mexico, am I a drug trafficker?
Yes.
And you cross state lines.
Oh boy.
I have a lot of friends that go up to Denver and they're like,
point
can
comes
I bring
federal.
my marijuana suckers back to Texas? I'm like, no, but technically you can't.
Mix it up in a bag full of some lollipops, you're fine.
But again, you're lucky not to get caught, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's skip down to what procedures that a cop has to go through when they pull you over. Do you guys know what comes to mind when a cop has pulled you over? What procedures do you notice that they're doing?
One that I learned actually, which is just kind of like a small thing they do, and I never realized it, is when they physically pull up behind you, they're kind of like at that angle. And that's so that if the person they pulled over gets out, starts firing, they can hide behind.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They can hide behind their engine because that's the safest and thickest part of their vehicle. And so because if you park directly parallel with the previous car and you hide behind your door, you're going to get a bullet. But if you park at an angle and you can hide behind your entire front end of your police cruiser or whatever vehicle you may be in, that's much safer. And that's something every cop does.
Well, I did not know that.
How about you, Kara?
I mean, like I mentioned this a couple of times, but I know that they ask for your license and registration. I've been pulled over a couple times. But I know that they what is the rule about them? Like I said, I've always been taught that you can call 911 to ensure that the cop is a legit cop. So what do they just have? They stand at your window and what they have to wait until you verify that? What's the law? What is your right as a citizen to hang on for a second? I know you have a right to pull off safely, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing is you have to pull off as soon as you can in the safest manner
so you
possible.
have that right.
Right.
And then I know that they're going to ask for license and registration, but you do have a right to
You do
verify.
have to pull over pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I don't think you can call 911 and be like, can you verify this before I pull over?
Yeah.
Which would be nice if you're on a dark road, right?
I mean, every murder podcast I listen to, it's a massive thing amongst women now, especially. All the hosts of these very, very popular podcasts are driving this point home for women of if you're by yourself, you're on a desolate road or something, you call 911 before you roll down your window.
Mm-hmm. Even for cops?
Yeah. Just because there's been a lot of, not a lot, but enough to raise concern of, police officers posing as police officers or someone acting like one. So I think this is probably more important for someone that's in an unmarked vehicle or not in a typical cop car.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like women and men
because anyone can buy a little siren thing or whatever, little flashy lights.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I learned, this is from portlandoregon.gov, and this is actually a police officer telling the story of what he goes through hypothetically, a hypothetical situation when he goes through when he is pulling someone over. Yeah. One of the things I learned is that they are actually actively looking for a safe place to pull you over, that a lot of times the reason that they kind of hang with you for a minute is to give you that time to, or give them the time to find a place that would make sense for you to pull over.
And this is from the city of Portland. It's the police bureau, so it's written by the police.
Yeah.
It's actually really fascinating. Do you have the link pulled up, Kara?
Yes. So, according to the city of Portland, which rep in my hometown, if you're being pulled over, you should stay calm. Traffic stops are emotional, but safety is the goal. So, arguing, yelling, swearing, is just going to escalate the situation, and you may be threatening to the officer. Number 2, indicate that you've seen the officer by putting your turn signal on, and then pull over to a safe place where you're not blocking traffic. Number 3, to shut off the engine, turn off the radio. Number 4, keep your hands on the steering wheel and or out of your pockets. Number 5, when asked for registration and driver's license, inform the officer where in your car you need to find it. Number 6, you might explain to the officer if there are any extenuating circumstances and or take responsibility for your behavior. And number 7, remember you always have the right to discuss the incident with the judge if you disagree or believe the officer made a mistake.
See, that's how the police think of it. They think if I do something wrong, the judge will figure it out. And I get that, but it's also very emotionally draining.
We don't
for
study
people.
this in school. Like, I don't think I would have, like I said, I've been pulled over like 3 times. I don't think I've ever told an officer, hey, I'm leaning over now. I'm getting
I have heard, though, that it is more common in Black families for parents to pull their kid aside and say, this is what you should do.
No, that makes sense.
That's what it said in one of the books we're going to quote later, Policing the Black Man. They said that one of the things it says is that, this is a discussion that happens in most Black families.
Yeah. Have, in your experiences being pulled over, have you ever turned off the engine of your car?
Yeah.
I don't think I have.
I always do that.
I'm scared to accidentally run them over.
I don't think I have. I think I've always left my car running. Does that make me a dick? I don't know.
I mean, apparently, according to this,
well,
you're not doing it right.
all of these things, it's sort of put here as for your safety, but I actually think the better way to put it would be to calm the police officer down.
Yeah.
You have to remember that the police officer that's pulling you over is a person. They have a family, they have loved ones that care about them. They're thinking about getting home that night.
Yeah.
So these are the things that they would like you to do to try to make them feel better. As dumb as some of these things are, and as inconvenient and as, sort of against your rights as a free American to do whatever you want to do, just for the sake of making the situation easier, you should try to do these things.
And so this, now below that, they did write basically an outline, or basically the thoughts of an officer as they pull over. And I want to read some of it. I won't read the whole thing because it's a little long. It starts off, did that guy just blow a stop sign? I look at the cross street as I approach. Yep, definitely a 4-way stop. And the car definitely didn't stop. Heck, I didn't even appear to slow down. I'm positive I have probable cause to stop the car if I would like. I checked the computer, I have no calls waiting for my attention, and amazingly, the patrol cars in the districts close to me are also free. If I make this traffic stop, other cars are available to take 911 calls in the area while I'm busy, but more importantly, if the driver is trouble and I need help quickly, it is close by.
Now, real quick, let's break that down. So the thing that stands out to me here is I have probable cause to stop the car if I would like. That means the police officer has to think, is this worth pulling this person over?
Yeah.
I think if more police officers took into account that whether it's a really dangerous crime or if it's just something that somebody accidentally did, say once, that whether or not it's worth it might change their mind about pulling that person over. It's their job, but if somebody blows a stop sign once, is that really that bad of a crime? Maybe they can follow them for a second, and if they do something else or if they see something else, then they can do it. To me, that's a stupid reason to pull somebody over.
Well, but you got to think of it this way too, is he pulls them over, gives them a ticket for blowing a stop sign, they never do it again. If he doesn't, they do it again, they T-bone a family of 4 next time.
But they're still going to do it. They're just not going to do it when a police officer's around.
Yeah, maybe
them.
so.
It's, I don't know. I don't think it's worth the encounter. But then the other thing though, that I thought was super interesting with that speech is that they make sure that other police are nearby in case something goes wrong.
Right.
So even if you're dealing with an officer that's by themselves, running away is the stupidest thing you can do because they're going to make sure that other police officers are there to help them.
Well, that's the constant communication. Like, you don't necessarily see it, but they are on the radio with dispatch. They are on the radio with other officers. Other people know what's happening.
I hate it in horror movies when there's a cop character who doesn't call something in.
Right.
You know, they're going into like a haunted house or something where they hear screaming and they're not calling in. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, that makes no sense.
Yes. So, to continue, it's a relatively quiet side street, so I have no trouble getting behind the green Nissan.
We're not picking on Nissans here, by the way.
I have a Nissan. I see lots of traffic infractions that I choose not to do anything about because the maneuvers required to get behind the violator are too dangerous and not worth the risk. Looking ahead, I try to anticipate a safe place to stop. If I flip on my lights as we approach the top of the hill, the driver might stop just over the crest, leaving us easily rear-ended by other traffic approaching from behind. In this case, it is flat, but there are parked cars on both sides, leaving no room to pull over out of traffic lanes. I follow a little longer and see an empty parking lane in the block ahead. Maybe we can attempt to pull over in this space.
Now let's skip down to the I flipped the front-facing floodlights on because I always thought that cops were being assholes when they flooded you with light. So yeah.
So at this point, they're pulled over, and so I flip on the front-facing floodlights on and I flip the front-facing floodlights on, swivel spotlight, and high beams on. I pull in about a car length behind the Nissan, but slightly offset to the left to provide me some protection from other cars approaching from the rear. Pushing on the brake, forward motion, stopping, and throwing it into park, turning the wheel hard left, and opening the door and getting out. Coffin exited. I take a breath.
Oh, real quick. So the part we skipped over, he was saying that most cops consider their cars coffins when they're pulling someone over because it's where they're at a disadvantage that they can't get to their gun as easily because they're stuck in their car, and if somebody fires at them, that they don't want to be there very long, so they try to get out of what they consider to be a very dangerous part, which is their car.
And so that's a way of them explaining the fear of pulling somebody over because you don't know who's in that car.
Right.
They can immediately step out and open fire on you.
Right. And then I guess we don't have to read like the whole thing, but the part with the spotlight I did want to really highlight though, because they use that as a way to get an advantage over you so that you can't as easily shoot back at them if they're approaching you at night. They said it doesn't work as well in the day.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's statistics about more cops get shot in the day or something like that. But at least from their perspective, shining that light on you, taking that away, that view away from you is important.
Yeah. And so this whole thing is just a traffic stop from the police officer's perspective. What goes through their head, what they communicate to dispatch, what they communicate with the person they're pulling over. It's the whole process, and it's really fascinating because I feel every account that we hear is from the person being pulled over. It's from their perspective.
Right. We never hear the cop.
To hear this perspective and to hear the humanity in the fact that exiting the coffin now, like that's a deep feeling.
Yeah.
There's
a part here where they say why do the police have to be so gruff, and the line here he says is the police live in a world of possibility, not probability. 99.9% of the time, the above description is exactly the way the traffic stop goes, meaning like it's easy, it's not violent. But on a very rare occasion, instead of being met with a nervous smile, officers are greeted with a gun at the driver's window, and that so that is so scary. And that's a daily, hourly thing that they have to deal with.
I mean, if you're having an adrenaline rush, so to speak, X amount of times a day, it's almost like a roid rage. Like, imagine like the very physical effect of like cortisol flooding your body and having that adrenaline rush and your stress levels are up. That physically does something to your body to be that anxious all day. And I do have to give credit there, and perhaps that's also why when police are making snap judgments, they've literally had like stress hormones pumping through their body all day. Like that, this is a physiological effect that someone's experiencing.
Police have a high rate of divorce and having psychological stress and problems coming from that, because it is a really hard job, and you have to remember that when you're encountering them.
Yeah, and you think about how many officers have drug and alcohol problems as well.
Right.
And it's a lot of it's coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
So much of it is because it is such a high tense job, you know.
Now, when you are pulled over, these are different things that you have rights
Yeah.
as a citizen. This is from the ACLU, which I know is sort of the ire of conservatives, but who cares, because they're the ones that talked about this the best. You have the right to remain silent. You know about that one. But for example, you don't have to answer any questions that a cop asks you about where you're going, where you're traveling from, what you're doing, where you live. Now, this could be controversial to say this because, you know, a lot of people would say if you have nothing to hide, then why can't you just be helpful
Like, why
and
be
make it
difficult?
easier for make it easier for the cop. But I always remember a line from the movie The Judge, which with Robert Downey
I just
Jr.,
watched that like
Robert Duvall.
last week.
Do you remember that line? So it's about a judge that gets arrested for a crime,
Yep.
and Robert Downey Jr. He's his son, right?
Yeah, it's his son, and
he's a lawyer.
His son. So yeah, Robert Duvall is a judge, been there for 42 years. His son, Robert Downey Jr., is a hotshot lawyer. Judge is on trial for a crime. His son defends him in court.
The line that stands out is he says stop answering questions, and the judge is like, well, I'll answer it. I have nothing to hide. I didn't do this crime. And he says no, because every answer you gives them more of a reason to prosecute you, arrest you. It works against you.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things, like, you want to be helpful, you don't want to be a dick, but at the same time, they don't need to know some of these questions, and by doing so, you are actually implicating yourself possibly in a crime that you're not even aware of. For example, you could say, they say, where are you coming from? Well, I'm coming from work. But some people, if they want to be extra helpful, they say, well, I'm coming from the northern side of Austin, and 10 minutes ago, there was a robbery with somebody matching your description in the northern side of Austin. You just gave them probable cause to mess up your day. Now, you want to be helpful, but at the same time, you have to remember that they're not talking to you as your friend. They're talking to you just like the prosecutor will be.
Yeah.
Their job is to find something that you did wrong, even if you're innocent. They don't know that.
Right.
So they're treating you like you could be that person.
Another thing too, and we'll talk about it more, is you do not have to give consent to a search of yourself or your belongings. You do not have to, because in order for them to do that without your consent, they need a warrant, or extreme probable cause that, there's some there, and we'll go into that further. But the police, they can pat you down in case they suspect a weapon, but otherwise, you do not have to give consent for a search of your body or your belongings.
However, though, one thing that they did note on this is that just because you refuse consent might not stop the officer from carrying out the search against your will. But if you make that timely objection, it will help you out later on in the legal proceeding. A judge might look at that and say, they didn't consent to you, say, I don't know, looking in your purse or whatever, looking in your glove compartment, excuse me. A friend of mine used to make fun of me for saying that. So, is that in the glove department? Should I shop there in the glove department? Excuse me. Glove compartment. So, you can say, I didn't give consent. This is not a legal search. And therefore they can get thrown out. Cops hate that because they found something that is illegal and they wanted to get you for it. But at the same time, they need to follow the rules. And if somebody says they don't give consent, they need to have that actual probable cause, which leads to an actual warrant to arrest you, or to search for something to arrest you. And that is not just, how do I put it, like inconsequential sort of, legal stuff. That is your rights. And you should at least proclaim it, even if they're going to break it.
And we'll get into this later too, but there are instances where, people, they will consent, like, yes, there's nothing in my car, like, go ahead. And the police plant, an 8-ball of cocaine. And guess what? Oh, look what we found in the back seat here. Right. And there are, we'll discuss it later, there are real instances of that happening. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's not a conspiracy or something. You know, there are a lot of cases that get turned over years later because a cop was found to have done this multiple times, and they have to throw them all out after that because they don't know the cop. You know, they don't know which ones the cops planted, which ones are really there.
Yeah.
The next one is if you're arrested by police, you have the right to a government-appointed lawyer if you can't afford one. Might not be a great lawyer. Depends.
But you get representation regardless.
Yeah. And then this is an interesting one for nowadays. You don't have to answer questions about where you were born, whether you are a U.S. citizen, or how you entered the country. But certain rules apply near international borders. I think it's within 100 miles, something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the distance is, but
I think I read 100 miles. Within any international border, you do actually have to prove you're a citizen.
yeah.
Sometimes on a daily basis. And that's usually due to the color of your skin.
I mean, I remember actually Shelby and I are going there this weekend up to Devil's River, and it's by this town Del Rio, which is basically right on the border of Texas and Mexico. And if you go on Highway 10, you go through a border checkpoint, and every time we go through, it's just like, oh, hey, where are you going? We're like, oh, we're going back to Austin. All right, have a good day. That's it. You know, and I know there are other people, other Americans, or other people who are not from here, but here legally, who have a significantly harder time getting through that checkpoint than I do, strictly because of my skin color.
Yeah, I in my opinion, that shouldn't be something that's protected in the law. That I don't think that police should have the ability to ask you things like that. It leads people to lie.
Yeah.
And also mind your business.
Yeah.
like you're not doing anything wrong,
Right.
You know, by driving.
Right.
So like what cause do you have to ask me what I'm doing?
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we get into warrants? How does a police officer get a warrant to search you or your property?
So police officers obtain search warrants by convincing a magistrate, which is supposed to be a neutral, detached person. Usually, I think that's just another word for a judge, right?
It's a judge.
Yeah. They convince them that they have probable cause to believe that criminal activity is occurring, and they have a very specific thing that is to be searched. And so...
specific place, item, person, thing they're specifically looking for.
Right. They're supposed to do that.
Yeah.
That's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, and they have to write all this out in a written statement under oath. It's called an affidavit, and they present that to the judge.
And only that property can be searched legally. They can't search in a house if the warrant specifies a backyard, for example, nor can they search for weapons if the warrant specifies marijuana plants or something like that they're looking for. Again, however, one thing that we talked about in the last episode are dozens of cases, probably more than that, probably hundreds, that they did it anyway, illegally, found whatever it was, and even though it was illegal and totally wrong for them to have arrested them for that, the person still got in trouble, still got jail time, and it was defended by the Supreme Court that basically said you can, if you accidentally find something you weren't looking for, there's your bonus.
Another thing, how many times have we seen that in movies of where the cop can't get the warrant that they need, but they just take it that extra step and they find it and they bust the criminal,
Or like it's kind of a joke now where they're outside and they're like, I hear screaming. Do you hear screaming? Yes,
Right.
I do. I do hear screaming. I think we can enter this house now. Like that's all you really need
It's
now,
creating
right?
that probable cause. And in terms of searching people, so you can only search that specific person. And, you'll see officers maybe try and search somebody else. And off of reasonable suspicion, they can't search somebody, but they can detain them and question them. Anything beyond that, they cannot do.
I have a friend that is a writer, and he won't write any good cop character because he's that much anti-cop. If he has to write a character like that, he'll make him a security guard. Something
Like
like
a Paul
that.
Blart type.
Yeah. And he's that against cops. And And I think the reason though is because of some of these things, like, you know, in media, in movies and stuff, we joke about it's always a joke that police are, you know, but, you know, not going with the rules, going their own route, saying something like what I was just saying a second ago, where they, you know, just decide to bust in even though they're not supposed to. And that's like the tough, you know, the Beverly Hills Cop and all that stuff. Like that's like the whole thing that's why they're cool. But in reality, when cops really do these illegal things in order to do something they feel is for the better good, I think it really tears down the perception of cops. And I think that's what my friend is trying to do by not writing any positive forces of cops in his scripts, because up to now that is like the stereotypical cop figure that we all see and we've just sort of accepted, and he wants to change that. So okay, the two things actually. So if you believe your rights were violated, this is what they say to do. Write down everything you remember, including officers' badges, patrol car numbers, be a little bit of a Karen, you know, basically you're getting all their names and their bosses' names, right? It seems silly at the time, but it actually can help. Get contact information for any witnesses that may have seen what happened that can corroborate what you're saying happened. If you're injured, seek medical attention immediately. Take photographs of your injuries. I can't tell you how many people that I know that skip this step and then can't prove that they were injured.
Right. Do officers legally, I imagine so, do they legally have to provide you their like name, badge number and everything?
Yes.
I would think so.
I don't think that they have to in the moment.
But if you request it?
You can say what officer arrested me
Surely
or something
they have
like
to.
that.
And it's probably on your ticket or anything like that, too.
Everything's on your ticket, but like, if you're like, I want your name and badge number, do they have to write it out or give you a card?
I think back to that scene in that movie, and what really happened, where, you know, they take their badge off, right, when they're about to encounter protesters. That's to prevent people from knowing who did what.
Yeah.
So
I imagine there is that level of transparency of where you have to give that, but obviously...
But they get around it sometimes. I think. Yeah. With all that information, make a written complaint with the agency's internal affairs division. There's a civilian complaint board. That's where you're supposed to get your justice, not by running away. Don't do that. It only makes it worse. Even if you're right, in the moment you're wrong, and you just have to let it go. And the other thing I really wanted to mention, this has been a bigger thing lately with cell phone footage and stuff like that. If you think you're witnessing police abuse or brutality against somebody else, you have to stand at a safe distance, and if possible, use your phone to record video. I honestly think that cops are not getting worse. I think that they always have been about where they are now. We're just seeing it. You know, I don't think it's a conspiracy to say that, you know, say 1% of cops are crooked or something like that. Or, you know, 1% of cops are, you know, are innately going to do something really awful. Yeah. We're seeing that, and I don't think most people think that every cop is bad, but when they are bad, it is our responsibility to prove it, and that's how you do it. You can't interfere with what the officer's doing. You can't stand too close, which obstructs their movements, or you could be arrested as well. You have the right to observe and record events that are plainly visible in public spaces. Don't try to hide the fact that you're recording. Police officers do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy when performing their jobs, but the people they are interacting with may have privacy rights that would require you to notify them of recording. Like, they actually can throw out your recording if you didn't notify them that you're recording.
Right.
In many states, you must affirmatively make people aware that you're recording them. Police may not confiscate or demand to view your photographs or video without a warrant. Now, I didn't know that before I was reading this. And they may not delete your photographs or video under any circumstances. Yeah. This is something it didn't say, but, you know, if you really want to get smart with it, upload that to the cloud immediately.
Oh, yeah.
You shouldn't keep something on your phone that is valuable information that needs to get out to people, just in case if somebody was corrupt enough to do something illegal, they're going to be corrupt enough to break your phone or something.
Yeah.
But be aware that some officers may arrest you for refusing to comply with not giving them your phone. So you have to be willing to get arrested for this situation if you feel like it is bad enough. But you have to weigh that with whether or not it's worth it to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is sort of like the Good Samaritan thing almost. It's like you see a car broken down the road. Do you help them? Are there other circumstances? Is somebody having a heart attack where if you pulled over and helped them to a hospital, would that save their life? You have to make those split-second decisions, and there's no right or wrong way to do it, but it can make a big difference.
Or do you act like Seinfeld and you film and laugh at them as they get mugged?
I see. I don't. Oh my gosh, is this on Seinfeld, or is this something that the real actor did?
You don't remember it's the last episode of Seinfeld.
Oh, he gets arrested for it or something, right?
They all get arrested because they're just pointing and because it's right when the Good Samaritan law.
I'm 10 years older than you. I'm supposed to be still stuck on Seinfeld.
Because it's the last episode. It's when the Good Samaritan law became a thing,
right?
And they all get arrested because they're just laughing and pointing at this guy and filming this guy getting mugged. And then it's the court. They're on trial, and it's just everybody coming on the witness stand just talking about how terrible of people they are. Seinfeld.
I can't do any. Can anybody do that?
I don't think I can.
I've never seen an episode of Seinfeld. Don't yell at me. Don't yell at me.
You've never seen one?
No, I'm too busy watching trash reality shows.
Okay, well, fair enough.
All right.
Very busy.
So now that we have a good understanding of what your rights are, what a police officer's process is in being pulled over, what you can be arrested for, what a police officer may pull you over for, let's dive into how people become police officers.
Oh, and I do have to say one more thing, though.
Yeah.
So this goes for the whole episode. This is sort of a disclaimer. Even though we're giving you sort of tips, it's literally how to do things. We're not legal scholars. We don't, you can't follow our advice without talking to a lawyer, without taking your own responsibility for, anything that we say. We're not literally telling you to be a criminal or how to be a criminal or anything like that. We actually don't want you to be a criminal. We want you to consult your lawyer, read up your own rights and things like that to be sure so you don't get into trouble.
Legally, we probably have to say this is for entertainment purposes only.
Exactly.
Probably.
Yeah.
So let's start off with how to become a police officer by looking at the different types of police officers or different types of law enforcement. I want to start actually by asking each of you, if you were to go into law enforcement, what type of police officer would you like to be? What department, what would you like to go into?
Probably park ranger.
I was going to say the same thing.
That's like the only type of police officer that you're more likely to encounter a bear than like a criminal if you're in the middle of nowhere.
Also, I just like the aesthetic of park rangers as well. So I'm happy we're all on the same.
Or I guess I would also totally do, I'm really into true crime. So any type
of... a homicide detective.
Like a homicide detective.
I think I totally see you as a homicide detective.
Thank you.
Curtis, wasn't your uncle like a crime scene photographer or something?
Yeah, and I've talked about it with him a little bit, but so I can't say exactly what he was because I've never specifically asked. But yeah, I know he photographed and sort of help them categorize certain crime scene stuff. I know I don't think in some cases you don't have to be a police officer to do that. I think sometimes they hire firms or something.
Yeah, maybe.
But in his case, he was. Maybe this was before they hired firms out to do it. I'm not sure.
I know it's similar for crime scene cleanup.
Right.
They contract it out.
Right. But he was a real cop, and yeah, he did deal with crime scenes and things like
awful,
that.
And there is like I said, I'm really interested in true crime podcasts. Big fan of My Favorite Murder and Crime Junkie, and there's actually a lot of controversy surrounding these podcasts, particularly as of late, because in these episodes the verbiage that's used by people critiquing it is that they paint the police officers, all of them, as massive heroes. And I do have a problem with that because they are. And a lot of these times, They're helping bring these families peace. They're helping bring these families rest. And I do think it is important, especially as we get into like what a police officer is, how to become one, that we can acknowledge that there are some really fantastic people in what is maybe a broken system. But I don't think it's wrong for us to celebrate the police that, you know, bring justice for these people. And I think it's silly
It's not. I agree. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I've read article after article after article about it, talking about how it's problematic to paint these police as heroes.
If you want a good true crime podcast, and it's not everybody's favorite flavor, but Last Podcast on the Left is one of the largest true crime and just general podcasts in the world right now. But they do a very good job, and their narrative format is my absolute favorite format that they do. Marcus Parks is wonderful. But they do a very good job at pointing out in specific cases that they dive into how the cops either did wonderful in their investigation or they did absolutely horrible. They're very good at pointing out when the cops do well or when the cops do poorly.
The thing I've found too, talking to police, is they are often their own biggest critic. You know, they'll be the first to say, man, he screwed that up, or man, he was a criminal thug and he shouldn't have been a police officer. You know, because they know it shines badly on them, on their department. You know, it puts them in danger. You know, when somebody is doing an illegal act in front of you as another officer, that puts your life in danger. That's one of those things where you after it happens, you pull them over and you probably punch them in the face. You're like, never do that again.
Yeah.
You know, because that was the scariest moment of my life, and it didn't even have to be.
Right.
You know, this was a nothing thing that you turned into something else. They don't want it to escalate.
Oh, absolutely.
There are plenty of good cops out there.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about them.
So the first type of cop, and this is, I mean, the general, just all around police officer, it's the patrol officer. Chances are this is going to be like their first assignment. This is when they get into the police force. They're on their probationary year. They're going to be a patrol officer. I mean, these are the people that you see in certain designated areas. They have their areas in the city that they just roll around in their car, either on foot, bike, also motorcycle, some places horseback, and they wouldn't get in trouble for, you know, riding the horse drunk off duty.
If that's true.
If that's true.
That's something I don't want to look up because I don't want to disprove
I know, right?
I just want that to be true so badly.
Yeah. So
it's not against the law if you didn't know it.
These are the folks where if you call 911 and you need a police officer, they're going to send a patrol officer, right? Oftentimes these are the people you see in the TV shows where they have the partner that they ride around their car and they, you know, just drive around basically looking for stuff to, you know, enforce the law on. I mean,
they're the grunts, basically. That it's what you see, you know, probably 90% of the time, as if you know, you're as far as just, you know, roaming around or whatever. Yeah,
they traffic control, crowd control, responding to 911, working, you know, athletic events, you know, football games, anything. They're the ones at the concerts, they're the one at the games. Those
handle domestic disturbances.
Yeah, those
make
are
traffic
just
stops
like
sometimes.
the generic police officers. And then we get into investigations, detectives and whatnot, and
white collar crimes, basically. I remember I think it was an interview with the one of the creators of Cops, and he said there's a reason that you know, on Cops you don't see them arrest like the CEO of some like crooked company, so because they're wearing, you know, a nice iron shirt. They don't come out shirtless and screaming at the police. They just get quietly taken away with their head drooped, and that's not good entertainment. Yeah. So these are to me, these are these white collar crimes are the ones that actually cause a lot of damage, even though they might not necessarily
be on like a grander scale.
Yeah, they might not necessarily be like in the moment disturbing the peace, but they actually cause so much societal damage to whole neighborhoods and whole cities, the whole country sometimes. And
so the way you have investigations, and then you have auto theft, narcotics, robbery, burglary, sexual assault, child abuse. Are those under investigations?
Yes. So if you live in a city that's big enough, they will break these things up into different departments. But if you're in a smaller town, it might just be all under one umbrella. It just depends on kind of how many crimes. If there's enough crimes for a single person or a whole group of people to investigate.
Mm-hmm. And then we get into another form of law enforcement, which is ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
I never knew what that meant before investigating this.
And I guess it's important to point out, too, that ICE and Border Patrol are separate entities, right? And so ICE's mission is to protect America from the cross-border crime and illegal immigration that threaten national security and public safety. ICE focuses on legal and safe immigration enforcement, terrorism prevention, and combating transnational criminal threats.
Yeah, border controls, like, they don't have like a jurisdiction to enforce that, right? It's just like, oh, hey, get that guy.
Well, I think Border Patrol is specifically at the borders. ICE is just dealing with immigration and customs enforcement everywhere.
I think doesn't border control chase people if they, let's say they jump the border and they see them or something?
Oh yeah, like it's a full-fledged law enforcement
it's not just
body,
at the border,
but
within
it's
a certain mile
or whatever it is. But their jurisdiction is specifically, like at border enforcement.
Right, they're not going to like go into the middle of America and catch someone. Who's
that is where ICE would go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or the FBI if it's
or the FBI, some other enforcement, but yeah.
From the ICE website, they said on an average day, real quick, I got to point this out. So I included this just to sort of be fair, but I have to say that the ICE website, if you've never been on it, it is worth a look because it is like, how do I say this? It's like a PowerPoint that your like dad like created about how cool his job is.
That's so specific.
Like, I'm not trying to, I'm sure they do important things, and this is literally what they list, and they list it in a way that's like very quick to read. Like, I copied this whole little paragraph. This was on a whole web page. It was like one thing at a time with with a literal superhero character that they actually there's a video of a superhero character that they have on there comparing themselves to literal superheroes. That is just ridiculous.
ICE.
But this is what they say. But I should also say that this is refuted by several other entities. I've read in the past, but this is what they say. On an average day, ICE stops or collects 4,000 pounds of narcotics. They make 87 criminal arrests. They 4.93 million in illicit currency and assets are seized. 6 victims identified. 284 administrative arrests. 335 detainers issued. What were you gonna say?
6 victims identified is, what does that mean? Like,
I don't know.
That's very vague. And what's a detainer?
No, it's like, I think it's supposed to be like detainee.
Okay.
Or I don't know, something like that. I'm not sure. No, this is copied from it, so it's a detainer issue. I actually don't know what that is. Maybe it's to tell them that they have to go back. I don't know.
Oh, okay, I got you. A detainer, an ICE detainer, is a written request that a local jail or other law enforcement agency detain an individual for an additional 48 hours after their release date in order to provide ICE agents extra time to decide whether to take the individual into federal custody for removal purposes. So it's basically just asking the local jail that has the individual to hold them for a longer time so ICE can decide what to do with them.
509 removals conducted, 12 gang members removed.
Also very vague.
Very vague and very weirdly specific.
That was one of the things that was refuted by another story that I found. It's not here, but basically they were saying that the vast majority of people that they arrest are completely like bystanders. They're like they're not dangerous. There's nothing wrong with them except the fact that they're here illegally.
Yeah.
And that they really try to push how many gang members that they arrest, but for the amount of money that we're spending, 12 gang members is really like not that big of a deal. Even just because you're a gang member doesn't necessarily mean that you're like a threat to the community. You might have just joined the gang for protection or something like that.
Yeah.
And then 3.26 million immigration cases managed. I think that's eventually. But yeah, that's based on 2020 totals, which by the way is way up since Trump had the basically locked down the borders.
Yeah.
So crime went up. Amount of people being in this system went way up. It hasn't all been daisies.
Which, like, by the way, in my opinion, if there are people who come to this country and incite violence against citizens, or they're bringing drugs, or they're going into communities and picking on vulnerable children, we don't need them here. Like, there is there is absolutely a purpose to what they do. I think the problem is the argument is that we've often seen that there are people who are not a threat to the community and who are low level people on the totem pole, and that's when a lot of people have a problem with ICE. It's not to say that everything they do is bad and that there should just be no deportations. I don't think that's what anyone's saying. I think it's saying there is overreach and there is probably some very questionable judgment going on.
Yeah. And to get this, they have to interrogate thousands of people just for being near the border and Mexican.
Yeah. Or, Guatemalan or South, whatever it may be.
Exactly. I'm sorry for just saying Mexican, but I just anyone that looks non-American in their eyes, like it's not worth it. It's like if you went door to door in America and was like, give us your drugs. Do you have guns? Like that would be like, oh my God, we can't do that. Like no matter how many crimes it stopped, it would be over the top. Yeah. And I feel like that is sort of what's happening with this. Like, sure, they have some impressive numbers here, but is the money and is the, amount of disruption to these people's lives and our lives worth it?
Yeah, I mean, is the removing a dad who's been here 30 years and has his children here and who works and pays taxes worth it? Does the average citizen care,
I have a question, if you know, I don't know. I have never looked this up, but I have heard two different things. One thing I heard was a lot of illegal immigrants do pay taxes. The other thing I've heard is how can they pay taxes if the government doesn't know where they're at? How does that work? Are they here illegally? Like how if you're here illegally, how do you pay taxes? Like I know it's a thing somehow, but I don't get it.
A lot of times it's like a conditional green card as well, or like a conditional whatever. So you're waiting for your immigration appointment to be approved, or your employer's deducting taxes off of their payroll because you're a contracted employee. Like you don't need a social security number.
Would they technically be here illegally though? Like I feel like maybe like
I get what you're saying.
The language is mixed up because I hear all the time illegal immigrants are a huge benefit to our tax system. But if they're here legally enough to pay taxes, then why are they illegal?
A quick look just says that the IRS estimates that about 6 million unauthorized immigrants file individual income tax returns every year. Research reviewed by the nonpartisan congressional budget indicates that between 50 and 75% of unauthorized immigrants pay federal, state, and local taxes. How, I'm not sure, but that's what the IRS is estimating.
We got to cover that in a later episode.
Yeah, we will cover immigration later. So moving on to other forms of law enforcement, we have traffic. Which, aside from your regular patrol officers, you go on to highway patrol, which is, their own thing. Since it's stranded motorists, they're patrolling the highways, making sure your roads are safe.
Giving tickets.
Giving tickets. That's
how we usually see them.
You have airport police, which,
Imagine the you would see as an airport police.
Maybe literally.
There is nothing I would hate more than to be the police officer who has to take a Karen off of an airplane before it takes off.
A Karen or drunk frat boys on their way back from Vegas.
That would be the worst
awful
day. Airport police, I mean, they're drunk, disorderly people, theft, assault, illegal parking cars, medical crisis. They're, doing
What's
police
interesting
work
about them, though, is because they work at airports, they have to sometimes figure out if a crime has happened and if somebody is guilty of something before they have to get on their plane.
Right.
Because they have to decide if it's bad enough or provable enough to stop them because in some cases they're leaving the country.
Yeah. And also, I mean, they're working directly with the TSA on terrorist prevention.
Yeah. Well, they're also working like with flight attendants, pilots. Like the second you obstruct a flight attendant or pilot's right to do their job, police can then come in and arrest you.
Can't pilots arrest people?
My parents both work in the aviation industry, so from what I understand, no, you can like a citizen's arrest.
Maybe that's like a movie thing.
You can do it obviously like as any other citizen could if somebody was disrupting a plane.
Yeah.
But otherwise, they just call.
But they're the ones with the little handcuff things.
Yeah. There's the air marshal. Is an air marshal's real, isn't it?
It is real, but the office or the flight attendants and pilot don't usually know who the air marshal is.
Right, gotcha. Yeah, it's a whole secretive thing.
Yeah.
Are they on every plane or
just
randomly?
It's randomly.
Interesting.
Another really
That'd be
quick
such
fun
an
fact.
Interesting job.
It would. A quick fun fact. When you get on an airplane, when the flight attendants are saying hi to you, they're looking you up and down to figure out who looks strong enough to call on an emergency. So next time if you get a double glance, you're not being flirted with, fellas. They're just trying to figure out if
They're
you're
like, oh, this
strong.
dude's head is bumping the ceiling of the plane. Like,
Yeah, anyway. Quick little fun fact.
That's crazy. That's really interesting.
okay, so yeah, like we all said, park ranger, conservation. It's the job to be. You're, patrolling parks, areas, enforcing the law. Oftentimes you're dealing with animal rescue. You're
Or dead bodies.
Dead bodies. You're dealing with, just crime
Or
that happens in
finding
the
lost
woods.
people.
Yeah, a lot of times search and rescue, volunteer stuff, working with people who get lost in the woods. A lot of times just helping out with conservation and trail development, management of the parks, stuff like that. Also, a big one is enforcement of hunting and fishing regulations.
One
Big
thing
thing.
that's not on this list, I wanted to ask you guys about since you're in Texas. What's a Texas? Is there a difference between a ranger, like Walker, Texas Ranger?
Yeah. So
What's a ranger? Because I actually did not look that up.
The Rangers were actually one of the first. I think we talked about it in the first episode, maybe.
Did we?
And when we were talking about the history, we might have touched on it, but they were one of the first, like law enforcement's like agencies that were put in place, and it was mostly they were basically created at the time to push Native Mexicans and Native Americans basically just out of Texas. That was like the whole thing.
What do they do now, though?
Now, I think the Rangers are still a thing, but basically they're just a specialized police force.
I mean, what's their specialty? I'm not trying to like drill it. I just
They
like.
Carol.
allegedly patrol protected areas, like
Okay.
wildlife and stuff. So
Okay, so they're a park ranger.
yeah, they're
I think they're
specifically
more
tasked with
symbolic.
managing and protecting any part of a public land.
But
So Walker was a park ranger?
well, historically,
I never watched that show.
historically, the Texas Rangers were the group of law enforcement officers that were put out to go after dangerous people. Like a famous one, they were the ones who hunted down Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh, okay.
Wait,
So they were sent out on the dangerous missions to get the bad guys that regular law enforcement could not get. There's a really good movie called The Highwaymen with Woody Harrelson and Kevin Costner. And yeah, so that was really during that era was like the tail end. The Rangers were really no longer in use. Like that was like the last thing the Rangers really did as, the Rangers. Now
it's more symbolic.
Now I think it's more symbolic.
okay, but also apparently not every state has them.
Yeah, it's like Texas.
Arizona,
It's the Texas
California,
Rangers.
Colorado, New Mexico, New York, Texas.
Yeah.
And then there's like a national park service.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
And so yeah, that was the whole point of the Texas Rangers, and now it's more. Yeah. But yeah, another one, corrections. Those are the guards that run prisons and jails, which to me sounds like the worst.
I didn't realize that they were real police. I actually thought they were like heightened security guard. Like
No, because I mean, there's a lot of times in certain, places where it's just police officers that were like you can either be assigned as a patrol officer or whatever, or you can be assigned to corrections. A lot of times, depending on the size, I think, or just the jurisdiction, whatever it may be, corrections is its own thing, separate from the police department. But there are a lot of instances where it's all run through the same department. It's all the same people.
The next one's interesting. The
Deputy sheriff, and the sheriff is an elected official, which is weird. But I guess it seems like sheriffs also are kind of more like it seems like a sheriff is more of a political position than it is a law enforcement position. Am I wrong?
It's like a weird mix of both. So some states actually still assign certain sheriffs. I don't think it's elected in every state. I think in most states it is. But yeah, it's kind of it's almost like I think it's like the figurehead.
Yeah.
So kind of, but there are also, this is deputy sheriff, but there's also just sheriffs, not the deputy. Like, and they're not elected, right? So I actually don't know the difference between that either. I'm sorry, I should have looked more of this up.
Well, at least in my understanding, like the sheriff is always elected, and then the sheriff has their deputies. Like my father-in-law is a sheriff's deputy.
Do they just deputize? Or do do they find police officers that are really good and they deputize them or something and they lift them up to another level?
I think it's run similarly as like I'm pretty sure it's the same as a police officer. You become a sheriff's deputy. Like you go through the same process as just a police officer, but like you're a sheriff's deputy, like you're. I think.
Okay.
Maybe we should have done more research on this. Sorry, everybody.
Well, so what we have here, it says, unlike most officials in law enforcement in the United States, sheriffs are usually elected, although some states have laws requiring certain law enforcement qualifications of the candidates. So like in some states, you have to be a cop first, and then you can run for sheriff or, something like that. The responsibilities of sheriffs and their agencies vary considerably by county. Many sheriffs have the role of police chief, though some lead agencies with limited law enforcement duties. Sheriffs also often are responsible for managing county jails and security at local government buildings. They're sworn peace officers with the power to make arrests and serve before a magistrate or a judge, serve warrants for arrest or order for arrest, and give tickets and citations. So some states also extend their authority to adjacent counties or to the entire state. So sometimes their jurisdiction is just in their area. Some states make it much easier and just widen it.
So it sounds kind of like you said, like they're the figurehead of the law enforcement within whatever their jurisdiction is.
That's what it seems like. Yeah, I don't totally understand the difference between a deputy and just a police officer, but I have a feeling that they're just not that different.
Right. Yeah, I think it's kind of along the same lines. It's just one's under the sheriff's department and the other is just under the police department. And then this is interesting. The alternative supported by the police and defund the police movements, and this is one that's fascinating to me, which is CRT, community response teams, which I think is an incredible idea.
Well, and so this is the part in the show where if you're totally against the idea of defunding the police, we have to be like, calm down, actually listen to what defund the police is trying to do.
And I know you and I have talked about this before, where I hate the phrase defund the police because it does exactly that. You're going to take away everything. No.
It's going to be chaos. It's going to be anarchy. It's going to be the mobs.
The correct term is reform the police. Or something along those lines. Defund the police just means take away the police, take away everything. And that's just not accurate. That's not what's meant. Unfortunately, we've seen that hijacked early on because people knew, people against the movement were going to react in that way.
Well, it's also what caught on first. It was like so people who were for the idea of defunding police, liked the fact that it caught on and it was a it was kind of a sensation that everyone was talking about. Unfortunately, a lot of conservatives used it as a way to scare people because just the term defund the police sounds scary and it sounds like you are against policing in general, which is not the case for most people.
Yeah. And so this is from the Douglas County Mental Health Initiative, and it says the community response teams pair a member of law enforcement with a mental health clinician to respond in the community, overlapping shifts of 40 hours a week, and streamline access to mental health and substance abuse services for individuals in Douglas County. Is this Douglas County, Kansas?
.co.us. I think this might have been...
Or is it Douglas County, Colorado?
It might have been Colorado.
I think it was Colorado.
It is.
So Douglas County CRT partners with fire, EMS, for specialized field medical clearances, bypassing emergency departments when seeking direct placement into psychiatric care. The teams follow up on each call and offer a case management component to ensure people connect to services following a crisis.
This should be a thing that all police want.
It should, yeah.
Right?
I mean, it takes the focus off of these mental health crises. It puts it into the hands of professionals who handle these specific things, and it gives police officers time to focus on real dangerous crimes.
And the police officer can be there at the same time, but they don't necessarily have to be the one interacting with whoever it is having a really bad day, a really bad meltdown.
I was like, for example, like a domestic violence type situation, the cop can be there if it goes sour, but you can also have a mental health professional who can be there and, turns out the husband has severe PTSD and he's an alcoholic and he's, drunk out of his mind. A mental health person can help him and they can get him into further care.
It fixes the problem instead of just shoving it away and hoping it fixes itself.
And I don't see why this hasn't gone widespread across the entire country. Like, it seems like an incredible system.
you have to be, you know, all of these different police offices are, you know, they're so separated by city or by state or whatever, with all these different ideologies and all these different people running it the way that they want to run it. And yet a lot of them don't talk to one another, at least not for a while, about what is working, you know, what is worth their time to invest in. You know, so it takes movements like Defund the Police to, I think, really shoot a message to, you know, all these little individual satellite police offices that maybe they should try something else that they haven't tried before, and how successful certain things can be like this. You know, if you live in a place that's more rural, you might not really think it's necessary to do something like this, but it could really help.
Well, and didn't we see this in the last episode with the officer in, I think it was like Washington, D.C. or whatever, where he tried this decades ago and it worked great.
But it wasn't kicking ass, right?
Yeah.
You know, it wouldn't be an episode on cops, or at least it'd be like, you know, the little middle segment that doesn't really have much of an impact or whatever. You know, it would make cops look better.
Yeah.
But would it necessarily make the average cop who's trying to be a hero in the moment feel like a hero?
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on a little bit to prerequisites and police academy training. What do you need in order to get a police academy?
You know, it's interesting because I actually found this page on the Modesto, California police site. And it just randomly came up that way. And Modesto is the city right by Ceres, which is where I grew up, where Tyler grew up. So it was just by random that it came up. But this, according to them, the only automatic disqualifier for a position as a police officer is if you have felony convictions as an adult, or any misdemeanor domestic violence convictions. That's an automatic disqualifier. It's very hard to get past that.
Yeah.
In most police districts.
Makes sense.
You do have to have a high school diploma, or I believe a GED equivalent is fine. Some, including Modesto police, require college credits, but I'd say a good portion of them is like any college credit. Like it doesn't have to do anything with the law or any kind of training or anything that would help you. Like you can just take anything. The conservative joke is like you would take basket weaving, and it would qualify.
Yeah.
So the website was funny because it was actually like talking to you as if you might be like a kid.
Interesting.
Part of it at least. So it was like, even though, they say that your juvenile crimes, are sealed up and no one can see it afterwards, we can see it. So be a good student and don't do things. Like it was interesting how it was, because it was really talking about like, just because you're a kid doesn't mean you can get away with everything. Some of it will haunt you and will prevent you from getting jobs. They do an employment history, just like any job, to make sure that...
Look at what you've done in the past.
Yeah.
Credit history.
Yeah. Credit history was an interesting one. Yeah. I remember somebody telling me that was a police officer that a buddy of theirs had some kind of debt from like an ex-wife. That was on their credit, and they said, we want to hire you, but you gotta get this cleared up before we can.
So is it like debt, as in like, okay, if you have a bankruptcy you can't, or is it like if you're behind on child support?
It can be
like
anything, and the reason they do that is they don't want you to be in debt so that you don't steal money,
right? You
don't do a favor for somebody.
In a desperate situation.
Yeah, to make sure you're not in a desperate situation. Exactly. There's also a test that most police districts want you to take and pass, called the PELLET B, and that stands for Post Entry Level Law Enforcement Test Battery. It's a multiple choice, fill in the blank written examination designed to measure reading and writing ability. Applicants are given 2.5 hours to complete it, which contains 5 sections. Spelling. Applicants select the correct spelling of a word from a list of options. Vocabulary, where you figure out the correct meaning of a word from a list of options. clarity is important on this, where applicants select the sentence that is most clearly written from a pair of options, reading comprehension, which is kind of self-explanatory, and then this last one, cloze, CLOZE, where applicants use contextual clues to complete a passage that contains blanks and missing words.
That's an interesting one.
And this is great. Like this is exactly what we're asking for. It just might not necessarily be enough of it, because you actually can fail it and take it again.
Right.
I don't believe there's I think you have to wait like a period of time. I want to say it's like a month or something like that before you take it again. But you can fail it over and over again and then eventually get into it. So that part, I'm not sure if that's really teaching you, the lesson, or if it's just teaching you how to take a test. But it is great that at least there's some basic level of communication that you have to prove that you do.
I'm pretty sure I've taken a standardized test with those exact categories,
Right?
Like in high school. Like, and it makes sense though, because you think about how much of police work is writing down reports, filling out affidavits, doing paperwork, all the red tape you have to do. Got to make sure you know how to use the words correctly.
And then the next thing is training. The training division is actually designed to test your limits. This is a quote from a police officer giving advice to future police officers. He says, "Our training division is designed to test your limits, to instill those ever so faithful words of honor, duty, and respect, to prepare you for the eventuality that you may one day be called upon to lay down your life for that of your citizens, your community, or your country. That it's an awesome responsibility for both you as a future law enforcement officer and for the instructors who will teach you, provide the path to success, and give you the tools that will someday save your life." They talk about it being a badge of honor. And I wanted to include that because they want police officers to do good. Mm-hmm. Even though the system might be broken, it might help some officers that shouldn't be helped. The vast majority of them want them to be upstanding citizens that do a good job, protect themselves, and help the community. So I'm not anti-cop, and I don't like when people are anti-cop.
Yeah. Well, and the first part of that PELLET B is POST, which in itself stands for Peace Officer Standards and Training. And that's another program that basically it's an incentive and voluntary program that works to just create the standardized, practices and helps benefit the improvement of police officers. And it creates tools and research opportunities, basically just to improve police officers.
Yeah, and then so if we want to just go through it real quick, the average, what's the typical cop? So the average age is 40.
Yeah.
The 2019 workforce was 812,000 officers.
And all these stats are as of 2019.
Average salary 70,000, which you could argue is a lot, or you could argue is way too little for what they do. They are literally putting their life on the line every day.
And that's 71,000 for male and 63,000 for female. Which
pretty big discrepancy.
That's a big jump.
Are they less? Are they putting themselves in less danger because they're female? I mean, right. I don't get why there's any difference.
Yeah. Well, and we'll look. There are 692,000 male police officers and 120,000 female police officers.
That's actually up.
Yeah, and a lot of people will say it's because one, there are more males, and two, and it's for the same reason that females make less. There are more males higher up in power within police departments. It's the same issue. Just a different conversation.
Right.
I can't think of a bigger boys club than a police force, but okay.
100%. Looking at race within police force, 67% white, 12.4% black. And it says in where we got these stats, says, to be fair, the black U.S. population is only 13.4%.
I believe I added that. I don't think that one part was from that. Yeah. I just kind of wanted to make sure. I remember somebody saying to me, I think it was a black person, said, what percentage of people in the U.S. are black? And I think I guessed 17 or 18%. He looked surprised. Mm-hmm. He was like, "That's closer than most people get." Yeah. He's like, we're like, I think it was a Chris Rock joke or something where he says, like there really aren't that many black people in the country. It's just, they live in all like kind of tight
spaces.
Quarters. Yeah. So in some cities, like 5 or 6 cities, there's 80% black people or something like that, but as far as the whole makeup of the country, only 13.4% are black. So it sounds low, but it is sort of representational of the community.
Look at white, Hispanic, 11.7%. And then what interests me is looking at higher education. So you see the most common majors, protective services, business, and social services. And basically, when you look at this website, it's an incredible website with all these different stats. It has it broken down into these things where like the bigger the square, the more degrees there are. But basically, the higher up you go from bachelor's to master's to whatever, and then PhD, it just gets more and more specific. So you look at just a bachelor's degree or associate's degree, and it is so broad, the amount of the different types of education these people have. But as you get higher and higher up, it's pretty much all the same, as in more of protective services, legal, these types of things that really go into the idea of justice and law enforcement.
Well, we usually think of police officers as a blue collar job, but I don't really know if there's any argument against, other than maybe just harder to recruit, making it so that, you can't be a police officer until you get a bachelor's or something. I don't think that's unreasonable. I mean, I understand it's harder for people to get that. You might have to pay them more. I'm all for that. But you should have some perspective on a wider culture than just yourself.
Yeah.
One thing I didn't know before this was that police officers are actually recruited, just like in the Army.
Yep.
Quote, the fact is, given the current environment of policing profession, recruiting the next generation of police officers is more difficult than ever. So they have recruitment, just like with the military, because, it's hard to find somebody who's qualified to be a cop who wants to be a cop. That is sort of the ultimate problem, and that is why sometimes people think that all cops are bad, because a lot of the cops that they're getting are not necessarily the cops that you want on the streets. They're the people who want that authority, but not necessarily have the fortitude to handle it.
Yeah. So what happens when you get into police academy? So this is looking back as of between 2011 and 2013, looking at kind of some of the stats of actual police academy. So 47% of academies were based at educational institutions. I'm assuming that meaning like universities or something of that nature.
It doesn't always.
No, I guess what does it mean by educational institution?
So there's actually there's companies that just specialize in, they're like cop academies. They're
interesting. Okay,
kind of like cop college.
So rather than being run through the police department itself,
or
it's run through, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
It's run through this academy.
Yeah, it's a program. It's like a vocational college, that kind of a thing.
And so I guess it goes in like who ran a lot of these trainings. So 20% of academies were run by municipal departments. Sheriff's officers ran 10%. State police highway ran 6%. State peace, post ran 5%. 96% of academies were run in a class structure. Just like as you would imagine it.
48% of recruits are trained in military model stress training.
Yes.
18% were trained in non-stress models that emphasize academic achievement. 34% were trained with a mix of both. The average length of a basic law enforcement training is 840 hours, or about 21 weeks. To me, that's too quick.
Yeah, that's not a lot of time at all.
Like, if it's this meme going around of this kid, asking like, if it takes a lawyer, 8 years or whatever of study to practice the law, why does it take a cop 21 weeks to enforce the law?
Right.
And to me, that's just all too logical. It just makes so much sense.
That's unfair to the cop, because they might want to do good, but because they are not given the education in the law structure, they make a mistake and they escalate a situation that doesn't have to be.
So within those 840 hours, or roughly the average is 806 hours. Every program is structured differently, but it's all relatively the same. So here's kind of the averages. So 200 hours is split up for operations. That's 52 hours per patrol procedures, 42 investigations, 38 hours emergency vehicle operation, 25 hours report writing. 168 hours goes to weapons training. That's 71 hours firearms, 60 hours self-defense. 21 hours goes to use of force.
Not enough.
That's learning agency policies, de-escalation tactics, and crisis intervention strategies. 89 hours is self-improvement. That's 49 hours of basically just health and fitness. And then 86 hours is legal education. That's 53 hours criminal and institutional law. 23 hours traffic law.
It's just when you put out the hours like that and you like put this in, you contextualize it. You're literally like, okay, in 3 days, you're going to learn 3 long days. You're going to learn use of force. Next week, we're going to really quickly run through the legal education. Yeah. Like, that's insane.
That's like it's like 2 weeks of legal education.
Like, I'd probably have the same amount of constitutional law and criminal education as a police officer.
We had to take like a legal class in journalism school.
Yeah, and even just like all my like study of history and journalism law and business law, ethics, I studied a lot about the Constitution and stuff.
And yet, you and I are not even close to being qualified to enforce that.
No, absolutely
After
not.
semesters and semesters worth. So,
so now it's time to get the music out for Breaking Bad.
Here we go.
Because now I want to talk about what makes a cop break bad.
Yes.
Does it just happen? Like some of this is going to be kind of hypothetical, but I actually found some really good resources. You found an excellent resource.
Yeah, I'm actually very excited to talk about the specific cases that I found, because it's astonishing how movie real it is.
Okay, so we're gonna make a prototype cop right now. Okay, so let's make a name for our prototype cop. What's a
Jack Johnson.
Jack Johnson.
Okay, not to be confused with the singer.
Oh my gosh, we shouldn't use Jack Johnson. We might get sued.
Okay. I don't know. Oh goodness, I don't know.
Johnson Jack.
Johnson Jack. Jumpin' Johnson Jack.
Yeah. So yeah, he is a hopeful recruit. Okay, Johnson Jack. And just I'm gonna pretend like we're doing like a video game where we're gonna dress him in the clothes and we're gonna do the whole thing. We're gonna make him look perfect,
he's clean cut, high tie. He's ready to be a police officer.
Okay, so he has his first day, and he discovers, being a cop is tough.
Yes.
More than that 800 hours led him to believe. So you're constantly interacting with people who have a negative view of you.
Yep.
Which is why cops are like, against Black Lives Matter, because they feel like it just makes their job harder.
There are, they get pulled over and they're immediately antagonized.
Right.
And,
and I do understand the idea of like, if you're not a racist cop and you pull over a black person and the black person says, pull me over because I'm black, or, something like that, how that could immediately antagonize you, even if you weren't racist, even if you didn't pull them over for any special reason, that could start things off on a really bad, bad.
It's very easy to understand how you could quickly feel that the world is against you.
Yeah.
There's the fear that police feel. That's something that the podcast that we were listening to, Things Police See, talked about a lot, that police don't talk about too often, that, you're constantly being threatened with violence. And even though the actual statistics say that you are not that likely to die as a police officer, it still feels scary in the moment. That's very understandable.
Well, we saw the clip not too long ago, the 2 police officers that were just sitting in the car and someone came up and just completely unloaded a full clip of a handgun on them. Mm-hmm. And specifically they were targeted because they were cops. They weren't doing anything. They didn't do anything to anybody. They were just sitting in their car.
Right. And then on that same podcast, Things Police See, which I highly recommend listening to.
Yep.
One of my favorite quotes was that the host said was, "Every cop can instantly tell you a story of a time they were scared about a situation that escalated, but most struggle to think of a single story where they saved the day or actually made somebody's day better," meaning a story that was just good.
Yeah.
They struggle with that because the bad memories stick with them more than the times that they helped.
Which is a shame because, like I said, I mean, I had that story in a couple episodes ago of the cop helping the guy who just ran out of gas. But, you know, it's also what are people going to want to ask more of? Like, oh, you helped push a guy's car to the gas station, or, oh, you know,
Took down the criminal.
Yeah.
Took down the gang member.
whatever it may be. And 9 times out of 10, probably not going to be a good memory.
Well, and what's scary too is, you know, if you help someone out, if you get out of your car just to help someone, you are actually risking your life. In some situations, there's something called police ambushing. Statistically, it's a very low phenomenon. I do have to say that. I'm not trying to over-exaggerate it, but it is a constant risk that they're going to be called out on some benign task
Yeah.
that is actually meant for them to be attacked, just like what you're saying. And then the other thing that show covers a lot is that hot call, that first call you get that makes your blood boil, is how he describes it, which promises to be especially dangerous. Now, in some ways, you might have, as a cop, as Johnson Jack, is what we're calling him, right?
Yes.
That, you know, this might be the reason he became a cop, right? Because this is the real cop. And this is the, you know, this, I think I got that from Lethal Weapon or something. I don't know. It's one of those cop movies. You know, and this is the real, you know, this is when you really prove yourself. And this is why you put all this effort and training and all this stuff. But on the other side, you also have to get home at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And you can't die in this car crash. So every cop has that first call or that major call that is called a hot call that, you know, sounds really bad. But one of the things the show points out as well is that the ones that sound really bad sometimes end up being nothing. And the one that you think is going to be nothing turns out to be this crazy situation where you almost die.
Have you seen the movie? And I know we reference a lot of movies in the show. It's just easy to do.
And I never have any idea what you guys are talking about.
I'm such a huge movie nerd too.
I babble on at work
have to
about
send you some movies.
and everyone's like, "You like movies?" I'm like, "Yes." No, it's with Jake Gyllenhaal, Michael Pena.
End of Watch.
End of Watch.
Yeah.
Yes, I think.
Okay, I've actually seen that one.
Obviously, End of Watch is very over embellished and it's this grand thing, but it does give a good example of just the constant fear that could be around every corner for a police officer. You know, it's a real thing, and I think the movie does a good job at showing that fear.
Yeah, and so our archetypal cop, Johnson Jack, he goes through years of this, right? And he's just always on edge, always having people spit at him and call him a pig and things like that. You know, for absolutely no reason in some cases, just because he's wearing that uniform, right?
Yeah. And oftentimes probably has other officers backing up saying, "Hey, you forget them, you're with us, you know, we're your brothers." Right. Like it's us and them.
Right. And there even is a tactic that when they're training cops, that they want that to be a part of it, this brotherhood idea, because they know that you're less likely to quit if you believe you're doing something important, if you believe you're part of team.
Something grander than yourself, you know.
So that's an aspect of it. It's not it doesn't have to be a negative part, but they actively use it to keep people in.
Yeah.
So you know, he's at a breaking point. He does, you know, maybe he's not doing so well with money, you know, and he's just having a hard time, doesn't feel appreciated, and he decides to do something illegal. Maybe something not crazy illegal, but immoral. And it starts off small, just like it does with any criminal, or most criminals, I should say. And then it escalates.
Yeah. And oftentimes it's, oh, well, he saw another officer do it, and, you know, he's not a corrupt cop. He's not going to do that, but everyone gets pushed.
And this often starts off by even just the way that officers are recruited, the way that they're trained, and the way that they believe they can get promoted easier. So one of the recruitment websites I was reading was talking about how. I'm sorry. Is this from your link?
Which one?
I think it is. I don't see the link here, but I think it is all from the. Is it UNODOC?
Yes.
ODC. Yeah, so this talks about different factors that make a cop bad, and so improper training and recruitment is part of that. So if they fail to do an adequate background check, fail to do psychological tests at the beginning and regularly, insisting that cops go to a psychiatrist whether or not they really want to, because a lot of cops don't want to because they're tough guys, right?
Yeah.
And even giving them a pass when they don't do well on the written examination, because they need them so badly, that is where corruption is rife. It's generally a way that police precincts have weakness is when they start off badly.
And so this document, it's written by Hubert Williams, who is the president of the Police Foundation, which is a national, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting innovation and the improvement of policing. He wrote this PDF called Core Factors of Police Corruption Across the World. And in it, he has some incredible examples of around the world, but also in the U.S. of basically practices within police departments that cause corruption. And one of the examples here is specifically with recruitment, as you said, Curtis. So he gives an example of a New Orleans Police Department in 1993. Antoinette Frank failed the civil service psychiatric evaluation upon applying to the police department. She was undeterred by this rejection. She hired her own psychiatrist to find her fit, and this initiative earned her a place in the department when a second civil service psychiatrist found her suitable after comparing the two previous evaluations. It goes on to say this evaluation procedure was entirely within department guidelines. It basically was just a horrible use of procedure within the department, though, because later on, it showed that Miss Frank's mental health and her, I guess you could say,
Moral compass.
Moral compass, yes, were just completely skewed. So she was with the department for a couple years, but in 1995, Antoinette Frank, with an accomplice, entered a restaurant in New Orleans, and they held and executed a security guard and two of the owner's children.
Gosh.
And to add to the horror of the incident, Miss Frank had moonlighted at the restaurant before, knew the family, and even responded to their call following the shooting as though she knew nothing about it.
And obviously, any cop is going to say this is wrong, shouldn't have happened. Like that's the easier example. They're not always quite as clear cut as that.
And so even though she slipped through the police department and through their procedures, the court did sentence her to death.
Wow, that's unusual.
Yeah, and so then along with recruitment, another thing that often leads to corruption is a severe lack of accountability within police departments. One example of this, let me scroll down and find it, was I believe it was in New Orleans again. Yes. So it says, corruption is a liability to occur when supervisors turn a blind eye to the warning signals of police misconduct. That was the case for Len Davis, a police officer in New Orleans, who ordered the murder of Kim Groves after learning that she had filed a brutality complaint against him. Federal agents learned about the intended murder because they had already had Mr. Davis under surveillance for alleged drug dealing and happened to be making a recording of him as he ordered the killing. That was a stroke of luck since Mr. Davis's supervisors had evidently missed or ignored numerous warning signs that the officer was out of control. Evidence that emerged at Mr. Davis's subsequent trial revealed that he had been on the subject of about 20 complaints involving brutality and physical intimidation between 1987 and 1992. In most instances, the complaints had not been sustained. In one case, however, he had been suspended for 51 days after having hit a woman in the head with his flashlight. As one candid officer told a reporter, he's got an internal affairs jacket as thick as a telephone book, but supervisors had swept his dirt under the rug for so long that it is coming back to haunt them.
I mean, you know, what is the reward for supervisors covering up for bad officers? Like, you know, that's something I actually didn't read anywhere.
They don't have to deal with it, or they agree with the cop and rather just keep him on the force.
Maybe it's that brotherhood thing.
Thing. Because then it goes on. Here's another instance actually in Los Angeles in the 1990s, and we all know how messed up the LAPD was in the 90s, and pretty much always. So supervisory negligence or complicity similarly accounted for widespread corruption in the Rampart Division of the Los Angeles Police Department. The corruption came to light in 1999 after Rampart officer Rafael Perez, who had been caught for stealing, no joke, had been caught for stealing $1 million worth of cocaine from the evidence storage facilities.
Oh my God.
He signed a plea bargain, which he promised to uncover corruption within the LAPD. Mr. Perez eventually implicated about 70 other Rampart officers in wrongdoing and painted a picture of a division where it was routine to conduct illegal searches, beat and shoot suspects, plant illicit drugs on them, and lie under oath. In recounting these incidents, Mr. Perez also showed how the LAPD had created an environment that allowed corruption to flourish. Supervisors missed or ignored signs that should have tipped them off to corruption in a local police station, and there was a general lack of oversight by command supervisors going all the way up through the department. Moreover, telltale signs of poor performance, such as suspicious paperwork, slipped right through supervisors, not only in Rampart Division, but also throughout the 10,000-member police force. It's just awful. It says the culture of corruption that produced the Rampart scandal also accounted for an act of gratuitous and revolting brutality that two police officers in the city of New York inflicted on Haitian immigrant Abnar Louima. The horror of the incident is not simply that two officers in a police station in New York felt free to sodomize a man with a wooden stick, leaving him with severe internal injuries. It is also a graphic expression of the underlying racism that taints American police departments and emboldened the two white officers to deny Louima's humanity as they defiled his body. It is the fact that one of the other officers present at the police station didn't ask any questions. In addition, it is the fact that no officer at the police station formally reported the alleged attack, and in the months following the incident, only two officers came forward to provide any useful information. So nobody reported it, nobody said anything to the officers, and only two officers came forward with any information at all.
This code of silence thing has to stop.
Yeah.
It is sort of at the root of what makes this awful. You know, I don't care if you're brothers or not, or sisters. You know, you shouldn't feel okay with standing by as something like this happens and then not reporting it.
Wow.
It's just crazy. I don't get it.
It continues that, so the nurse who treated Mr. Louima, she was supposed to file a report and send it to the Internal Affairs Bureau at the police department, but her complaint was never properly lodged or reported.
Wow.
It goes on to say that, in other words, the Internal Affairs Bureau, charged with rooting out incidents of abuse, had also followed the rules of police culture by keeping silent.
I mean, once it's that corrupt, it's not that surprising that it goes all the way up, right?
But that's what the culture create. Like, that's the culture. That's
But I think we need to be fair too. It's not just in the police force. Perhaps maybe their biggest implications are this code of silence, but we see this very early on in the fraternity system.
Yeah.
We see it on Wall Street. We see it in a lot of places, is this code of like protection. I just think that the consequences of this brotherhood or just like the code of silence in the police force is larger. But there, you know, we do see this like boys club mentality starting as young as, like, you know, 18 years old in college and covering up hazing stuff.
And even though it is mostly men at this point, I don't think it's necessarily just a male protection thing.
Not.
I think it's more, I think it just gets associated with it because men are associated with ego. But I think it's mostly just ego. Like, I think a woman or women could be just as likely to do the same thing and protect a man or protect another woman. You know, so yeah, I don't know. Just putting that out there.
But I do think like there is some human aspect of we don't want to like tell on our friends and our buddies, and
but once they do something so bad, how are they still your friend?
And that's a great question.
You know?
Because
you're not the
when
person
when you constantly hear the ridiculing and the antagonizing that you get from the outside, you know, the quote unquote outside world, but you have your brothers there who have your back every day and they're with you every day no matter what. Can you go against that?
I think it's more like to do military. With fear, though, and self-protection. You know, to be a quote-unquote snitch is, you know, you can get just career ruined.
We talked about it,
and sometimes doesn't do anything. You know, either. We
talked about it in part 1 or part 2. I can't remember, where, you know, police officers were afraid to talk about you know, like George Floyd or whatever it may be, because they have the union threatening to take away their pension if they talk against their brotherhood. You know, like that's a real thing. It goes up the ladder.
Well, and you know what this does? These kind of acts of corruption, like they have this really big effect. This quote here says, acts of corruption by people in power have long shaken public faith in government. But the loss of public faith is particularly acute when those acts involve the police. That's because the public relies on the police to uphold the law, protect the community, and assist it in times of need. Police are also the most visible arm of the government for most citizens and a yardstick by which they measure authority. When an officer acts illegally, he, or she, or they, dishonors both themselves and the law and justice system that they represent. You know, so there's a lot of incentive in keeping your honor as a police person, to do the right thing, even when it's not easy. And yet it doesn't always get done because they don't want to be that one guy that snitched.
What I meant, it's got to be really hard, right? You know, I imagine there's just such an immense amount of peer pressure. Like it's got to be so incredibly hard. Like, I mean, it's no different than you're hanging out with your group of friends. You know, you're a kid, and you know your friends are doing something, and you know it's not right, but they're like, come on. It's the same thing.
But you're a police officer. You are a moral standard, and if you're not that moral standard, you're not a police officer.
I feel like you're underestimating that. Yeah, you're a police officer, but like, to an extent, you're still that same person who can fall under that peer pressure. And when you're under that much pressure, like
I don't know. I don't get it though, because like they always talk about this thing where like when you put on the badge, you become a different person. So why is that a thing when you're being a cool badass cop, but not a thing when you have to do the right thing and it's inconvenient?
Obviously, something about the culture has to change to incentivize like telling the truth and also to destigmatize quote unquote snitching. Like, obviously, there is something culturally going on in the system. And I do think it has a lot to do with, like, the brother bandhood, whatever. It's like the military. Like, you guys go through a lot of shit together. You develop whatever. So I'm not quite sure how you break that barrier down. But clearly, there's a lack of incentivization to tell the truth. So something has to shift there.
Well, and let's look at our guy, Johnson Jack, right? So he's done something illegal. He's kind of tipping that edge. And, he's out on patrol at some point. And he witnesses another officer say, I don't know, unnecessarily hit someone they pulled over with their flashlight. We'll say police brutality. And they go off. They don't report it. He doesn't report it, whether he's scared, whether he's trying to protect the officer. The other officer later on says, hey, thanks for having my back out there. Gives him a sense of gratitude. All of a sudden, the police chief comes, calls him into his office and says, hey, I heard you did something great out there. Good job. We're going to put you on a better schedule. We're going to do something to benefit you. All of a sudden it's like, oh, well, so this is okay, whatever. And then he goes out and at some point he gets pushed over the edge, as people do, and he commits some form of act of police brutality. And guess what? That same officer who he intentionally or unintentionally had his back, all of a sudden he's got his back. And it just goes down the ladder, and it builds and builds and builds. And it takes away the incentive to do something good or to say anything or whatever it may be, because the incentive is to stay quiet, because that's how you protect the people, or that's how you continue the fear of saying something within the police force. And unfortunately, it doesn't really help out the community, because all of a sudden the community says, hey, if all they're doing is staying quiet and they're not keeping each other accountable, we can't rely on them anymore. And all of a sudden, Officer Johnson Jack is just another symbol of a corrupt police officer. Didn't mean to start that way, but the system kind of sent him down that path.
And of course, when this happens, the community doesn't want to rely on you anymore. And this is really happening now and has been for a while with the Black community. And I wanted to mention a couple of quotes from a really excellent book called Policing the Black Man. Highly recommend you read it, whether or not you are Black. I am not Black, but I still thought it was so interesting. They talk about a lot about the harm that over-policing Black neighborhoods does to race relations, that suddenly Black people become afraid or irritated at the concept of inviting the police to help them in a situation, just like what you were saying, Kara. They have to weigh whether or not they actually need the police against how this could escalate and somebody innocent could be killed.
Yeah.
In the book's eyes, they say the justice system is broken. So even at the point when it goes to a judge and that's supposed to be your time to get justice, even that is broken. And so this is the examples they give. It says, the entire justice system seems to be slanted against Black and brown people. Statistically speaking, if a white person is the victim in a case, juries are far more likely to convict and go for the more severe punishment to the accused Black person on trial. Prosecutors who play a numbers game to get as many wins as possible and to drop lost cases, or like cases that can't be won, will more likely pursue criminal charges against a Black man accused of a crime against a white person, because they know statistically they will be more successful. Isn't that crazy? I mean, even at the level of the law, even if you're trying to prove, or you think you've proven, that this crime happened, a prosecutor will not even follow through with it if the person that is on trial is white against a Black victim.
Well, I mean, we look at, I think it's another great, just blinding example in Brock Turner, right? He rapes an unconscious girl. He's caught by two guys in the middle of the act, and he is let go because it would be too damaging to his life.
Well, we can also see this in the media is guilty of this too. The way that we use like mugshots versus like pictures of people.
Yeah.
Like it's very common to see like Chris Watts. He murdered his family in cold blood, and the picture we always see of him is like the loving dad and this and that. And then there was a Black woman who got arrested because she forged an address to get her daughter into a better school district, and we're using like her mugshot, and this is a very common occurrence. So just societally, we just lend so much forgiveness and like benefit of the doubt. And
so much of it, I think, is unconscious too. I think the people that share the photos, I don't think they're always trying to be biased. I think they just do it.
It's literally just like that thing I mentioned at the top of the episode, is like these people were shocked when they realized that their reaction was to pull the trigger on a Black man versus a white man. And they were like, I can't be racist. And it's like, no, but like, this is what we talk about when we talk about institutionalized racism. Like, it's ingrained so deeply in the fabric of our communities in our country that it's inside you to some degree. So it's our job as individuals to root that out and fix it.
And the book also talks about how with prosecutors, the opposite is also true, that when Black people are the victims, which actually is disproportionately the case, that that if the person accused of the crime is white, it often gets dropped. And the reason that prosecutors give, at least in secret, I don't think they officially say these things, but they say that statistically black people are more likely to have lower educational backgrounds, and some prosecutors use that as a reason not to want to work with them. Essentially, they feel like they won't, that the victim won't be able to argue their case as well, and will be overlooked by a jury of people who might be better educated and white. So it's and one thing that really pissed me off in this book is the decisions they make to prosecute or not prosecute is completely at their discretion.
Right. And
most of the time, it's actually even praised as a saver of taxpayer money when they decide not to prosecute some of these cases that are tougher. They want those wins. They want to prove that the taxpayer money is being used well, so they go after the easy fruit, and the easy fruit is the stereotypical black criminal. Have
either of you heard of the case of Curtis Flowers?
No.
I implore both of you and everybody listening to this, go to American Public Media, their investigative podcast called In the Dark. Listen to season 1's great, but listen to season 2 where they cover the case of Curtis Flowers. It is the case of a man, and spoiler alert, he is now freed, but he was tried 7 times over the course of 23 years for a quadruple homicide that he did not commit. And the entire case is based off of just racism, fraudulent claims, false witness statements. It's horrific, and it's all because of this the district attorney, who is just this racist piece of garbage. But he would try him, he would get convicted, they would appeal would go through, and then he would try him again and try him again and try him again, over just because he could, just because he wanted to. So you really check out season 2 of In the Dark by American Public Media.
And just one last thing about and that's interesting. I don't mean to pass over that.
No, you're good.
I know we're running out of time. One more really interesting thing about policing the black man I thought was really interesting is that it was talking about how, if you want to understand why black people, even though they are a smaller percentage of the population, they get overrepresented as far as getting arrested and being part of the system. It's because at a young age, even as kids, they are way more likely, even though they are more likely to be the victim, they're more likely to actually be harassed by police for minor things. You're skateboarding after dark or whatever these stupid things are that they defend as, keeping the peace. That they are much more likely to be harassed and to be treated as an adult, even if they are kids. There's actually many studies that have shown that the average person overestimates the age of black boys to be older than they actually are, and they treat them like adults, even though they have adolescent minds.
Mm-hmm. I remember seeing, and I can't remember, I think it was some news organization doing some an experimental segment or whatever, where they got someone and they would, point out a white kid, and they'd ask their age, and it was always oh, they're, 11, whatever, and they usually get it right, and then it would be a black kid, and they're oh, well, he's, 17, 18, but it was, some 12, 13-year-old kid. And it's crazy. And it's those internal biases, I guess. It's one of those things that's really hard to explain or understand, I guess.
And Republicans have really kind of went for this, back the blue kind of thing, and Blue Lives Matter. I think for the wrong reasons, because, of course Blue lives do matter, but not corrupt ones, and not if that is meant to be as a way to sort of contradict the Black Lives Matter movement. They're not necessarily mobs just because they're protesting police violence. And one of the quotes from a story that was covering the Black Lives Matter movement was saying that the numbers of police killings of black people had dropped dramatically in the cities where they were protesting the most. Mm-hmm. However, that was offset by increases in black people being killed by officers in other places. Yeah. So it seemed to be working in some places, but also making it much worse in other places, and agitating cops, who felt like they were just being attacked for doing their jobs.
What's frustrating about the whole Blue Lives Black Matter or Blue Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter thing for me is all these deaths are completely unjustified, obviously terrible things, but instead of banding together saying, yeah, we can be better, we can all be better, it's an immediate defensive response. And I guess I don't understand that.
Can I just also say, in my opinion, a blue live is not a thing. Like, you are not always a police officer. And I think we've talked about this before, but you do take off your uniform. You can go home. You can be a normal person. Especially if you're a white person, like you're not always a blue live. You don't take off your black skin. Like, I really hate this analogy of like blue lives versus black. What is a blue lives? Because you're only quote unquote blue lives while you're in your uniform.
Well, and I really don't like it because it was only used as a way to contradict Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter didn't imply that other lives didn't matter or that blue lives or white lives or any other life didn't matter as much. All they were saying was, we see the disproportionate number of black people being killed. We see the lack of justice disproportionately falling on our communities, and we want you to know that we're watching and we see this, and that it matters. There should have been no
It's just
need to contradict that statement.
No, it's literally like saying dogs matter, and then it's like, but dog mascots matter too. It's like, that's not a dog. That's not a thing. Like, that's not, you could take off your mascot, whatever. Like,
or like just like somebody who say is a dog owner, I'll be like, what? Do you hate cats? Like,
I've used this.
What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I used this analogy quickly before, like another random episode we did, where it's the idea of like, your left hand is hurt. And I'm saying, your left hand matters. Well, what about my right hand? It's like, well, your right hand's perfectly fine. You've been taking care of it, but your left hand is hurt. It's like, well, but both of my hands matter. It's like, yes, they do. But your left hand is hurt and it's been neglected. And it's okay to remind you, hey, like, your left hand matters. It needs the attention. You can get your left hand attention. But instead, what's happening is, hey, left hands matter. It's like, yeah, but my right hand matters. Okay, look at my right hand. It matters.
Calm down, Rush Limbaugh.
And it's frustrating that people can't just be like, okay, I see that your left hand is hurt. Let's repair that. Let's get the left hand the help that it needs.
I like that analogy because it's both part of your body. You are one thing. We are one people. We can all care about this. Yeah. Your left hand is just as important as your right hand. I like that. If it's okay, I'd like to sort of conclude with just this thin blue line stuff. And then I think most of the other stuff we've kind of covered.
Yeah, go for it.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's the thin blue line, the whole idea of us and them. It's been the thing that's been consistent throughout this entire series. So I think it's a good place to conclude.
Yeah, and and depending on which side of this you're on, depending on your race and where you live, or whether you have cops that are in your family or whatever, you might think the police are the problem, you might think police are the solution, and after the Black Lives Matter thing caught on, this thin blue line thing really kind of resurged. Originally came from 1922, where Police Commissioner Richard Enright actually used it to quote, say that police were that intensive battle line, the first line of defense against criminality. And then it got sort of commandeered in the modern age when they created a flag. You might have seen it. It has the thin blue line and the American flag. By the way, it actually kind of pisses me off when people use the American flag and change it to something that fits their narrative. I don't care what it is. Like, I actually really think that's sort of non-respectful.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Well, the irony is that people, I'm not going to change our flag. Well, but you do every time you fly a blue line flag.
Yeah. Like, I don't get it. I mean, I've seen flags that are all blue, right? Have you seen those? Yeah. I mean, just sometimes they put the Punisher character on there, which was a character that was a cop that basically broke all the rules, and actually like executed people on the spot and stuff. I mean, these people, they're acting like they're being super patriotic, but really they're just sort of doing this dog whistle that's like not only saying that they don't think that the Black Lives Matter movement is important or, you know, or is justified, but is also saying that like in a way that like any cop, no matter what they do, is a-okay with them. And I really don't appreciate that. I don't like it. It's a relatively new phenomenon that you know, it's like literally somebody, I forgot his name. I think we covered another part, might have gotten deleted or something, but you know, basically, oh, here it is. The modern use of it dates back to only 2014. It was the brainchild of a white college student from an affluent suburb in Detroit, Andrew Jacob, who found the outcry against police violence following the killings of Tamar Rice in Cleveland, Eric Gardner in New York, and Michael Brown in Ferguson distasteful. So he felt the protests lack reverence for the police and that we weren't appreciative of them. So he created that logo. And he's literally making money off of this. Like, you know, this isn't a non-profit organization or something. Like, it's just this guy that created a popular logo that a lot of people decided to start selling. And I want to end off everything with a quote from a really interesting YouTube video. I don't agree with everything that this guy said, but I love this idea of us and them. This feeling that you get from having a literal blue line on a flag that's supposed to represent this separation between cops and the people that they are serving, and this idea of like what side of the line do you think that you're on, and do you think that could change tomorrow because whatever political winds shift and suddenly the thing that you're doing that's legal today is illegal tomorrow. And this is the quote. It goes, "There are no barbarians, no chaos on the other side of the police, only our friends and neighbors who might be in crisis because of poverty, inadequate health care, or any number of situations that did not make them our enemies. Don't the police adopt an image of themselves with the origins of war that strike a discordant note against the classic police motto of to protect and serve? Doesn't it seem wrong for them to be the line dividing those who deserve dignity and those who don't? After all, if the police are the dividing line, it means not all of us deserve to be protected, and not all of us are worthy of service. It means that they mark the boundary between people who are part of society and people who aren't. Where they stand determines who is us and who is them." And I really think you should check out the rest of that YouTube video. There's a link in the description. If I can click on it. It's called "The Philosophy of the Thin Blue Line." Again, I don't agree with everything in the video, but it is an interesting idea, and it's by a account called That Dang Dad, which I believe he actually was a former police officer, and there's a story there.
I think so, yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was just dead on to the point of like, why is there an us and them?
And I guess that will conclude Good Cop, Bad Cop. My goodness, what a long series.
Important.
That was a dense one, guys.
I'm sorry, guys. You guys got to give me an easier one next time. Something that can be like done in like 20 minutes.
No, I think, you know, this is one that's been a huge controversy for a long time, and it's been the main controversy in the country for so many years now, and it's been consistently there since the early 1900s. You know, it's been there, and it's been something that's everyone's been battling. And so I don't think it's a conversation that's going to end anytime soon, you know, but hopefully people create more understanding. I don't know.
I really hope that, you know, cops listen to this and start understanding how they're perceived and how to maybe change that so they can be the heroes they're supposed to be.
So, yeah, I guess hopefully y'all enjoyed it. You know, make sure to leave rate and review on wherever you're listening. We do have another heavy hitter coming up here soon. I don't think I'm going to say it now just in case it does change, but we are going to be working on something that is actually very topical right now, thanks to Texas. But yeah, if you want to get a hold of us, send us an email at pwbnetwork@gmail.com. If you have any questions about this series or any other episodes, or if you have a topic that came to mind that you want us to cover, let us know and we will cover it. If you want to check us out, you go to our website, podcastwithoutborders.com. Just check us out also on any podcast app. Follow us. Give us that subscription, help us build our numbers, and we'll keep on growing. But yeah, Kara, Curtis, any final remarks, anything you want to plug before we sign off?
No, I think I'm good.
No, we've talked forever now. I think I'm good.
And for anybody interested, if you've lasted this long, I didn't say it at the top of the episode, but we're recording in person.
All in the same room.
The first time.
Yeah, this is the first time that we've all recorded together in person. Curtis is on a road trip to find out where he's going to live next, and he's taking a look at Austin, and so we took advantage of the opportunity, and we got to finish off, I think we got to finish off this series pretty strong together, so exciting stuff, y'all. We don't know when the next time we'll record in person, but it was fun to do it this time, so until then, we will talk to y'all in the next episode. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Social Discord, part of the Podcast Without Borders Network. You can get a hold of us by sending us an email at pwbnetwork@gmail.com. You can also check out our website at podcastwithoutborders.com. Thanks for listening.